I've been living in Brooklyn for a few years now and working as a barista in a small, cozy coffee shop. It's the kind of place where you start recognizing regulars, learning their orders before they even say a word. One of those regulars was a guy named Sean. He came in almost every day, glasses, always smiling, always ordering a latte with almond milk. He was polite, easygoing, and never stayed long. Just a quick, "Hey, how's your day going?" before taking his drink and heading out. After a while, we started exchanging more than just small talk. He fidgeted a lot, adjusted his glasses, and his laughter sometimes felt forced, like he was trying too hard. Maybe he was just nervous, I told myself. Then, toward the end of dinner, he leaned forward a little and said he wanted to show me a special place. His friends were hosting a private party, something underground, a little exclusive. He made it sound like an experience I wouldn't want to miss. I wasn't sure. The whole thing sounded vague, and I wasn't really in the mood to go somewhere unfamiliar with a guy I barely knew. But he reassured me, said it was totally safe, just a cool hidden spot. I hesitated again, but he was so persistent, so confident that it was going to be amazing, that eventually I agreed. We got into a cab, and as we drove, I started realizing we were heading away from the more familiar parts of the city. The streets got quieter, the buildings more industrial. No restaurants, no bars, just warehouses and storage units. I told myself that maybe this was just one of those secret rave-type places I'd heard about, but something in my gut didn't sit right. The taxi dropped us off in front of a nondescript building. It looked abandoned from the outside, faded paint, no signs, just a heavy metal door. But when Sean knocked, someone opened it almost immediately, letting us into a dimly lit hallway where bass-heavy music pulsed from somewhere below. People were inside, some standing around, some laughing in small groups. It looked normal enough. But the air was thick, almost stifling, and there was this faint, chemical smell mixed with alcohol and sweat. Sean put a hand on my back, guiding me down a narrow staircase. "You're gonna love this," he said. I wanted to trust that. I wanted to believe I was just overthinking. But the further we went, the stronger the unease grew. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, I realized how wrong I had been to come here. The basement was larger than I expected, dimly lit, crowded, with a haze of cigarette smoke hanging in the air. The music was loud, but not club loud. More like a distraction, something meant to drown out other sounds. People were scattered in groups, talking in low voices, passing drinks around. A few turned to look at me, their stares lingering a little too long. I turned to Sean, suddenly feeling the urgent need to leave. But before I could say anything, he gave me a strange smile and disappeared into the crowd. Panic flickered in my chest. I scanned the room, looking for an exit. The staircase we'd come down was still there, but two men were standing near it now, watching the room like security. I took a deep breath and told myself not to overreact. Maybe Sean had just gone to get drinks. Maybe I was being paranoid. I edged my way toward the stairs, moving slowly so I wouldn't attract attention. But just as I was about to reach them, someone stepped in front of me. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a blank expression. "Where you going?" he asked, his voice low. I forced a small smile. "Just looking for my friend." He glanced over my shoulder, then back at me. "Sean?" I nodded. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "He left." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean he left?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he gestured with his head toward a hallway at the back of the room. "Come with me." Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where? The men by the stairs were still there, and I had no idea what was waiting outside that door. My hands were shaking as I followed him. The hallway was narrow and cold, the walls lined with peeling paint. A single flickering bulb cast long shadows as I walked. The man stopped at a door and pushed it open, revealing a small, windowless room with a metal chair in the center. "Sit," he said. I didn't move. He sighed, then took a step toward me. "Sit. Down." I did. A second man entered, closing the door behind him. He was thinner, with sharp eyes that scanned me like I was a piece of merchandise. "Do you know what's happening here?" he asked. I shook my head. He crouched in front of me, resting his elbows on his knees. "Your friend sold you out." The words hit like a punch to the stomach. He pulled out my phone from his pocket and dangled it in front of me. "Your family will be getting a message soon. If they want you back, they'll have to pay." I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. Sean had planned this? He had brought me here knowing what would happen. "You stay quiet," the man continued. "Do what we say, and this will be easy." I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body was frozen. The door behind me clicked shut. Then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on a thin mattress in a different room. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of damp concrete. My head was pounding, my limbs sluggish. My throat felt raw, like I had been screaming. I didn't know how much time had passed. There were no windows, no way to tell if it was day or night. The only sounds were muffled voices from outside the door. I tried to sit up, but the room tilted. My body wasn't my own. My veins felt thick, slow, like something foreign was running through them. Drugs. The realization made me want to vomit. The door creaked open, and the thin man from before stepped inside. He crouched next to me, his head tilting. "You're going to be here for a while," he said casually. "Might as well relax." I wanted to fight, to scream, to claw my way out, but my body wouldn't respond. The days blurred together after that. Sometimes I was awake, sometimes I wasn't. Faces came and went. The thin man, the broad-shouldered man. Others I didn't recognize. I remembered hands, too many of them. Laughter. The sound of my own voice, slurred and weak, begging. Then, one day, I woke up in a moving car. My head lolled to the side, my vision swimming as I tried to focus. The city lights blurred past the window. Someone was talking in the front seat. "Leave her here. She won't remember enough to talk." The car slowed. The door opened, and I was dragged out, my body too weak to resist. Cold air hit my skin like a slap. Then I was on the ground. The engine revved, tires crunching against gravel. I tried to lift my head, but the world tilted, and I collapsed onto the pavement. The last thing I remembered was the sound of the car driving away. I woke up in a hospital 2 days later. A jogger had found me, dumped in an industrial area on the outskirts of Brooklyn, barely conscious, barely breathing. They thought I had overdosed, just another addict who had taken too much. But the talk screen told a different story. Synthetic drugs, the kind used to keep victims compliant. The police came, asked questions. I told them what I could, but my memories were like shattered glass, pieces missing, edges blurred. They tried tracking Sean, but his trail was cold. The people who had taken me had vanished. No cameras, no witnesses. Just another girl swallowed up by the city. I didn't leave my apartment for months after that. Every time I stepped outside, my skin crawled with the feeling of being watched. Every shadow felt like a threat. I used to think bad things only happened to people who made bad choices. That as long as you were careful, as long as you trusted your instincts, you'd be safe. I was wrong. Because sometimes the real monsters don't look like monsters at all. They smile at you over a coffee cup. They ask about your day. And then, one night, they take everything. I study veterinary medicine and work part-time at a small animal clinic. The nights there are quiet, with only the occasional emergency. Most evenings, after my shift, I take long drives on the empty country roads to clear my head from lectures and exams. One evening, while scrolling through a local forum, I came across a post from a girl named Ashley. She also liked late-night drives and had even posted a playlist of road trip songs. We started chatting about music, road trips, and the best gas stations for coffee. She seemed fun, easy to talk to, full of energy. She looked just like her pictures, blonde, a little shorter than I expected, wearing a hoodie and ripped jeans. She smiled when she saw me, waved, and walked over. "Hey," she said. "Hope you like sour candy, 'cause I got a ton." We stocked up on snacks, got drinks, and hit the road. At first, everything felt easy and normal. We talked about our favorite road trip songs, laughed about bad first dates, and debated the best late-night food spots. She was fun, witty, talkative, the kind of person who kept a conversation going without awkward pauses. But after a while, I noticed something strange. She kept glancing at the rearview mirror. At first, I thought she was just looking at the scenery or checking her phone reflection. But then I caught the way her expression changed. Tense, focused. "You okay?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded quickly. "Yeah, just habit, I guess. I don't like driving alone at night. Always feels like someone's following me." I chuckled. "Well, you're not alone now." She smiled but didn't seem reassured. A few minutes later, she checked the mirror again. This time, I looked too. A pair of headlights followed us at a distance. She shifted in her seat. "This keeps happening. I swear, every time I drive at night, there's always someone behind me for way too long." "Maybe they're just headed the same way," I said, trying to be logical. She didn't look convinced. "Yeah, maybe." I checked the mirror again. The car hadn't changed position. It didn't flash its lights, didn't try to overtake us. Just a steady presence in the dark. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Let's see if they're really following us. I signaled right and took the next exit, leading onto a smaller, quieter road. The car behind did the same. Ashley's fingers drummed anxiously on her knee. "Take the next turn, see if they follow." I did. A sharp right onto an even smaller road, barely wide enough for two cars to pass each other. The headlights followed. No hesitation. "Shit," I muttered. Ashley shifted in her seat. "Okay, listen. There's something I need to tell you." I glanced at her. Now's not a great time for surprises. She swallowed hard. "It might be my ex." That caught me off guard. "Your ex?" She nodded quickly, eyes darting back to the mirror. He's not over it. He's been weird lately. Keeps texting me, asking where I am. And a while back, he told me if I ever got with someone else, he'd..." She stopped herself, voice catching. I felt my stomach drop. "He'd what?" She exhaled. "He said he'd kill him." My hands clenched around the steering wheel. "And you're telling me this now?" "I didn't think..." She shook her head. "I didn't think it would be like this." I looked in the mirror again. The car was closer now. Not dangerously close, but enough to make my skin crawl. Then, without warning, the engine behind us roared, and the headlights surged forward. "Hold on!" The impact hit us hard. The whole car lurched as metal slammed into metal. My head snapped forward, and Ashley let out a sharp gasp. I struggled to keep control, hands shaking on the wheel. Another hit, this time harder. The road was too narrow, no space to swerve or speed up fast enough to escape. The trees on either side blurred past, and for one terrifying second, I knew what was coming. A final, brutal hit sent us flying off the road. The world tilted, the car spun, and then, impact. Everything went black. a ringing in my ears, pain in my head, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I blinked. Everything was sideways. The windshield was cracked, the dashboard crushed inward. My hands felt numb, but I was breathing. Ashley. I turned my head, vision swimming. The passenger door was open. Ashley was being dragged out. A man. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hoodie. He had her by the arm, yanking her onto the dirt. She struggled, kicking, nails clawing at his grip. "No, stop!" she screamed. I fumbled with the seatbelt. My hands weren't working right. My brain was foggy. I tried to push the door open, but it was jammed from the crash. Outside, he was shouting at her. His voice was low, furious. "You really thought I wouldn't find you?" Ashley sobbed, struggling harder. "Let me go!" I couldn't sit there. I threw my weight against the door. Once, twice. The third time, it burst open, and I stumbled out, knees nearly buckling beneath me. The guy turned, eyes locking onto mine. His face was twisted with rage. "Walk away," he growled. "This isn't your fight." Ashley shook her head frantically. "No, don't listen to him." I took a step forward. "Let her go." His hand moved fast, a glint of metal, a knife. Before I could react, he lunged. Pain exploded through my arm, a hot, searing line from my elbow to my wrist. I staggered back, clutching at it, feeling warmth spill between my fingers. Ashley used the distraction to break free. She ran. The guy cursed, turning, and took off after her. I tried to follow, but my legs were shaky, my vision dark at the edges. My arm felt wrong, numb and wet. I pressed a hand against the wound, but the blood wouldn't stop. Ashley disappeared into the darkness, her footsteps pounding against the dirt. He went after her, moving fast. Then, silence. I stood there, panting, trying to keep my balance. My head was spinning. I stumbled forward a few steps, then collapsed onto my knees. Darkness took over again. I woke up to voices, the low hum of an engine, bright lights in my eyes, a truck, 2 men, farmers maybe. They were lifting me, talking, but the words blurred together. My body was cold. My arm felt wrong, like it wasn't there. I blacked out again. I woke up in a hospital. My right arm was gone. The doctor said they couldn't save it. Too much damage. The police came to ask questions. I told them everything. About Ashley, the car that followed us, her ex, the crash, the knife. They searched the woods. They never found her. They never found him either. Some nights I still hear it. The sound of tires behind me. Steady, never passing, never falling back. I've had some weird encounters through dating apps, but this one still sticks with me. It happened in my second year of college when I was still living at home. My parents had taken a short trip, leaving me alone for the weekend. I spent most of the day by myself, trying to focus on schoolwork, but by evening, I was bored and restless. I put on the TV for background noise and started scrolling through Tinder, just looking for someone to talk to. It didn't take long before I matched with a girl named Lisa. She wasn't the most stunning person I'd ever seen, but I wasn't exactly a model myself. I sent her a message, asking a few casual questions. She replied almost instantly, but her responses were really short. At first, I thought she wasn't interested. But then, out of nowhere, she asked if she could come over. It felt odd. Too fast. Too sudden. We barely knew anything about each other. But I was alone, a little desperate for company, and the idea of meeting someone that night felt exciting. Without thinking much, I sent her my address. About 30 minutes later, I saw a car pull into my driveway. I was waiting by the front door as Lisa stepped out and walked toward me. The moment she stepped inside, I felt off. Having a complete stranger in my house already made me uneasy, But there was something else about her. Lisa was awkward and quiet, avoiding eye contact. Maybe she was just as nervous as I was, but the whole vibe felt weird. We went to the living room, and I turned on the TV to break the silence. For a while, we just sat there staring at the screen. I tried to make conversation, but she barely responded. She stood up, and I walked her to the door. I watched as her car disappeared around the corner, feeling relieved that the awkward night was over. It wasn't even 10 yet, way too early for me to sleep. I checked my phone and saw a text from my friend Jake. He was supposed to be on a date too, but apparently, things hadn't gone well for him either. He lived just a short walk away, so I figured I'd head over for a bit. After grabbing a quick shower and a snack, I got ready to leave. By the time I stepped outside, it was close to 11. The neighborhood was quiet, the streets empty, just me walking under the dim glow of the streetlights. There weren't even any other cars on the street. As I turned the corner toward Jake's house, I noticed a vehicle parked on the wrong side of the road. It caught my attention immediately. It was just sitting there, engine off, like it had been waiting. Before I could process it, the headlights flicked on, and the car roared to life. It all happened so fast. 1 second, it was still, and the next, it was flying straight at me. Instinct took over. I threw myself onto someone's front lawn just as the tires screeched past. The car barely stopped in time, skidding to a halt inches from a fence. My heart was pounding as I scrambled up, trying to see who was inside. Under the glow of a street lamp, I got a clear look at the driver. It was Lisa. She was gripping the wheel, eyes locked on me with pure hatred. That psycho had just tried to run me over. And that meant she had been sitting out here, waiting for me, for over an hour. I guess she had figured out that I lied about going to bed. Before I could do anything, the car suddenly took off again, speeding down the street until it disappeared into the night. My legs were shaking as I bolted the rest of the way to Jake's house. When I got there, I told him everything. He let me crash on his couch because there was no way I was going back home alone that night. The next morning, I forced myself to go back home. I half expected to find my house trashed, broken windows, slashed tires, something. But everything looked normal. Still, my paranoia had me checking every room, every closet, just to be sure. There was no sign that Lisa had been inside. Maybe she had only wanted to scare me. I pulled out my phone and opened Tinder. I already knew what I was going to do, block her and pretend none of this had ever happened. But before I could, I saw that she had spammed me with messages. They were completely unhinged, long, rambling, full of typos and cursing. I could barely make sense of them, but one thing was obvious. She was beyond furious. Rejection is hard for everyone, but this was next level. Maybe I should have been more upfront with her instead of lying, but what else was I supposed to do? She ignored every hint I dropped. I just wanted the night to end, so I told her I was going to bed. But she didn't leave it at that. She had been out there, waiting, just to see if I was lying. An hour. That's how long she sat there. But what if I hadn't gone out at all? Would she have waited 2 hours? 3? All night? And what if I hadn't jumped out of the way in time? I don't know if she actually meant to kill me, or if she just wanted to give me a good scare. Either way, she got what she wanted. I stayed far away from dating apps after that. I never saw Lisa again. Never heard from her. And I hope I never do. During the late summer of 2021, maybe early fall, sometime between July and September, I matched with this woman on Tinder. She was gorgeous, dark curly hair, youthful face, and a body that caught my attention right away. Not long after we started talking, she told me she had just moved to the city, recently got out of a rough marriage, and her ex had been abusive. She shared some awful details about what she'd been through, things that made me feel bad for her. She even showed me pictures of her 2 little boys, explaining how hard it was raising them alone and how lonely she felt. Then, before I knew it, the conversation took a turn. She admitted she hadn't been with anyone in a long time and really needed it. I wasn't exactly in the best position in that department either, so I was definitely up for meeting her. But then she started asking for money. Said she wanted to get her kids a video game to keep them busy while she had company over. That was the first red flag. I told her I could just buy it and bring it, but she insisted they needed to download it directly. That felt off. She asked for a gift card instead, which seemed a bit more reasonable, but I was still wary. She made sure to tell me to be careful scratching off the code, so I pretended I messed it up. She got upset but quickly told me to come over anyway. Then she asked if I had extra cash to get another card. I told her I did, and right after that, she sent me her address. Since I didn't have my own car at the time, I called an Uber. Coincidentally, I got the same driver I'd ridden with a few times before. We had a good rapport, so I casually told him about my plans. He immediately warned me. Said he knew the area and that it wasn't exactly the safest place, especially for someone new in town. I wasn't super familiar with this part of the city, but I did know enough to recognize that this woman definitely didn't belong there. As we got closer, my driver glanced at me and asked, "This the place?" His voice had an uneasy tone to it, and that made me second-guess things. I admitted I'd never actually met her before and told him I had a weird feeling about the whole thing. He nodded and told me if anything felt off, just to call him right away, and I could cash app him for another ride. I thanked him and stepped out of the car. As I got closer to the house, I spotted 2 bald guys in the backyard, passing a blunt between them. The yard wasn't fenced in, so they were easy to see from the front. The second they noticed me, one of them froze, eyes going wide like he just saw a ghost. Without a word, he ducked down so fast it was like he vanished. His buddy must have caught on because he dropped too, twisting just enough that for a split second, we locked eyes. Then, gone. They were crouching behind some waist-high bushes, probably lying flat or crawling low. My gut immediately screamed at me to back off. I turned and walked fast, putting distance between me and that house. A little ways down, I spotted a church and sat on the steps. My hands were sweating as I pulled out my phone. I texted her, asking if she had company over. "Nope, just me," she replied. My stomach tightened. I asked her if she knew there were 2 guys hanging out in her backyard. She took a second to answer, then just said, "Yeah." I pressed further, asking who they were, but she brushed it off, saying something vague that didn't sit right with me. So I told her to prove she was actually there. Step outside, just for a second. She refused. That was all I needed to know. Annoyed, I sent one last message. I called out those guys, mocking them for being dumb enough to be outside smoking when they knew I was coming. No response. That was when I called my Uber driver and told him to swing back, promising him an extra $20 if he got here fast. He didn't hesitate. He lived nearby, had figured I'd be calling soon anyway. Within 5 minutes, his car pulled up, and I jumped in. I barely had the door shut before I started explaining everything. When I finished, he just shook his head and said, "Yeah, man, you're lucky you didn't walk inside. They probably would have killed you." Hearing it out loud made my heart slam against my ribs. I knew, deep down, that I had ignored every warning sign just for a chance to hook up. It reminded me of my buddy back in Jersey. He once went to meet some girl from New York despite me telling him it felt sketchy. He got a gun shoved in his face and lost his $500 watch. I didn't listen to my own advice, and it nearly cost me my life. To any guy out there so desperate to get laid that they'd overlook every red flag, hell, even a skull and crossbones warning, Do yourself a favor. Take a trip to Vegas or something. Just don't walk blindly into a trap like I almost did. It's not worth it. I'm in my second year of university. I've always enjoyed meeting people from different countries, learning about their cultures, their traditions, their lives back home. That's probably why I was drawn to events where international students gathered, just to hear their stories. That's how I met Matthias. He was from South America, here on a student visa, and he was charismatic from the start. He spoke about his country with a kind of nostalgic warmth, describing the food, the music, the people. He said he loved it in the U.S., but always felt a little out of place, that he wanted to stay but wasn't sure how. He made me laugh with stories about how everything here seemed so big to him. Portions, roads, even the coffee cups. It was easy to talk to him, and soon we started hanging out more, grabbing coffee, meeting up between classes. Over time, it felt like something was growing between us. He was attentive, always asking about my day, bringing up little details from our past conversations that I barely even remembered mentioning. He wasn't overly flirty, not at first, but he had this way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. I liked that. After a few months, we were spending most of our free time together. We weren't officially dating, but it felt like we were headed in that direction. He was always kind, always thoughtful, and never pushed for more than I was comfortable with. If anything, I was the one wondering where we stood. I was starting to really care about him. One evening, we were sitting in his tiny off-campus apartment, sharing a pizza, when he sighed and leaned back. "I have to tell you something," he said. His voice was quieter than usual. His visa was expiring soon. He told me he had been looking for options, trying to figure out a way to stay legally. He had considered switching to a work visa, but it was complicated and expensive. His professors had no connections to help him. If nothing changed, he'd have to go back home within the next few months. But he wasn't. "I know it sounds crazy," he continued, seeing my hesitation. "But people do this all the time. It's not even illegal if we're together, right? It's just helping me stay." I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure what to say. A marriage, even just on paper, was still a huge commitment. I barely knew what I wanted to do with my own life, let alone be responsible for someone else's legal status. For the first time since I had met him, he looked genuinely frustrated. "There's not a lot of time left," he said. "I need to know soon." I promised I would let him know. The next few days were filled with an uneasy silence. He didn't bring it up again, but I could feel it hanging between us. Every time we talked, there was something different in his voice, like he was trying not to pressure me, but at the same time, he was waiting for an answer. When I finally told him I couldn't do it, his face changed. It wasn't anger exactly, but something close. The next time we met, Matthias was back to his usual self, smiling, cracking jokes, acting like nothing had happened. I felt relieved. Maybe he had accepted my decision, and we could move on. I wanted to believe that. Then, the next night, I got a message from him. It was just a link. No text, no explanation. I hesitated before clicking it. When the page loaded, my stomach dropped. It was a private folder, locked behind a password, but the preview images were enough. Photos and videos of me, intimate moments, things I had no idea were ever recorded. Some were from nights I barely even remembered, moments when I thought we were alone, safe. I felt sick. Before I could process it, another message came through. "If you don't help me, I'll post them." I stared at my screen, my hands shaking. I wanted to believe this was a joke, that this wasn't real, but the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. I called him. He picked up immediately, like he'd been waiting. "What the hell is this?" My voice was unsteady. "You left me no choice," he said calmly, like we were discussing something completely normal. "You think I'm going to let you ruin my life over some moral dilemma?" I could barely breathe. "You filmed me without my knowledge?" "I did what I had to do." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Now you have a choice. Either we get married, or everyone sees what's in that folder." I hung up. My heart was racing. I needed help. The next morning, I went to the police. I brought my phone, showed them the messages, tried to explain what was happening. For a second, I let myself believe it was over. Maybe I had scared him off by going to the police. Maybe he had changed his mind. Then, on the third day, I came home from class. The moment I reached my apartment door, I knew something was wrong. Two men I had never seen before were waiting outside. They weren't students. They didn't look like delivery guys or maintenance workers. One was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, while the other stood in front of my door like he belonged there. I stopped mid-step. The other one stepped in close, blocking my way. "Where do you think you're going?" My pulse was hammering. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "We just want to have a conversation," he said, "about Matthias." I barely had time to react before I felt a sharp pain explode across my face. I didn't even see the hit coming. I staggered back, but they didn't let go. Another blow landed, this time in my stomach. My knees buckled. I felt hands on me, dragging me, pushing me against the wall. My vision blurred. I could taste blood. No trace of him anywhere. It was like he had never existed. I went back to the police, but without a direct connection to him, there wasn't much they could do. They took a report, asked if I had any proof it was related to Matthias. I told them about the threats, the messages, the photos. But without a posted video, it was still considered a personal dispute. That was months ago. I don't know if the videos are still out there, if he ever shared them with someone. Sometimes, I convince myself it's over, that he's gone for good. Other times, I feel like I'm just waiting for the next message, the next shadow in my doorway. I keep my curtains closed now. I double-check my locks. I don't go anywhere alone at night. But no matter what I do, I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. That one day, he'll come back. I want to tell you about this weird date I had a while back. I've always been kind of wary about online dating, but after hearing a bunch of my friends talk about their great experiences, I figured, why not? So, I downloaded an app and started scrolling through profiles, trying to find someone who seemed interesting. After chatting with a few people, I ended up talking to this guy named Jake. Jake seemed normal. He had a decent job, liked some of the same things I did. Just a regular guy looking to meet someone. When Jake arrived, I recognized him immediately from his pictures. He was of average height, dressed well, and had an easy smile that made me feel a little more comfortable. At first, everything felt normal. We said hello, ordered our drinks, and found a quiet corner to sit in. The conversation started off smoothly. We talked about work, hobbies, and our favorite spots around the city. He seemed genuinely interested in my job, asking thoughtful questions that made it feel like he was really listening. As we sipped our coffee, I felt myself relax, thinking this might actually turn into something nice. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be telling this story, right? Somewhere along the way, things took a turn. Jake's tone changed when he started talking about his future. At first, it was the usual stuff, wanting to travel, maybe buying a house. But then he got oddly specific, way too detailed for a first date. He wasn't just sharing his dreams, he was setting expectations. It felt like he was placing me into a role I hadn't agreed to play. I tried to shift the conversation back to lighter topics, asking again about his hobbies and interests, hoping to bring back the easygoing vibe from earlier. But Jake wasn't interested in that anymore. Instead, he started talking about his past relationships, and the way he did it made my skin crawl. He spoke with this weird detachment, listing reasons why things hadn't worked out like he was analyzing a failed experiment. The background noise faded, and all I could hear was Jake's voice, going on and on about his plans, his expectations. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. I had never been in a situation like this before, where someone spoke about their life as if it was set in stone, as if I was just another piece of the puzzle he was assembling. And the worst part? He didn't even seem to notice how uncomfortable I was. He just kept talking, his tone unwavering. Like I wasn't shrinking further into my seat with each word. I needed an out, fast. My mind raced through possible excuses. Maybe I could say I had an emergency? That I had forgotten about another obligation? As I opened my mouth to speak, he suddenly paused, his eyes narrowing like he had just now realized something was off. A silence stretched between us. I forced a polite smile and casually mentioned needing to check something in my car. It was the best I could come up with in the moment, and I hoped it sounded natural. I grabbed my bag and stood, my heart thudding as I prepared to leave. Jake's face fell slightly, his expression shifting from confidence to mild confusion. The way he spoke, the eerie level of detail in his plans, the complete lack of warmth, it was all wrong. When I got home, I deleted the app from my phone, at least for a while. I needed to step back, to remind myself why I had started this in the first place. I had been looking for a connection, someone to share moments with, not someone who expected me to step into a role they had already decided on. It wasn't about fitting into someone's checklist. It was about finding someone whose life naturally aligned with mine. I haven't sworn off dating completely, but I'm much more careful now. I take my time, let conversations unfold naturally, and trust my instincts more than ever before. It's about finding a balance between being open to new people while also protecting my own well-being. Looking back, I don't regret meeting Jake. Strange as the experience was, it taught me something valuable. Always listen to that small voice in your head, the one that whispers when something feels wrong. Because sometimes, it's not just nerves. Sometimes, it's a warning. This story isn't like the usual ones you see here. In this case, I was technically the random person online, but trust me, it gets creepy. Just stick with me. I'm not the best at telling stories. A little background. When this happened, I was 16 and had a habit of messing with people on the internet. It wasn't anything serious, just stupid pranks, nothing mean-spirited. But looking back, I realize now how something harmless can turn into something terrifying. I'm sharing this as a warning because what started as a joke ended up being way more than we expected. This all happened in a rough part of Louisiana, where crime was just a normal part of life. Now, onto what actually went down. This was in 2016. Most nights, I was at my boyfriend's place. He's now my husband. I was 16, and his brother was 20. We stayed up late doing dumb stuff, usually ending up at Denny's at 3 a.m., laughing way too loud, and probably annoying everyone around us. That night, we had spent hours watching wild clips from Catfish on MTV. At some point, we thought, wouldn't it be hilarious to actually catfish someone? I know, it's messed up. But at the time, we thought it would just be a harmless prank. We weren't thinking about how it could actually mess with someone. So, we made a fake profile on a dating app, using some random Tumblr girls' pictures. We swiped right on everyone, just to see who would fall for it. It didn't take long before an older guy, maybe in his mid-40s, matched with us. My brother-in-law was the one handling the messages. The guy was way too eager. Within minutes, he was practically begging to meet up. That's when we got the dumb idea to actually set up a meeting, just to watch him show up, confused and looking for someone who didn't exist. We picked a Walgreens nearby and told him to meet us there at 10 p.m. When the time came, we all jumped in the car, drove over, and parked. We sat by the side of the building, near the red box machine, waiting. A few minutes later, the guy texted, saying he was almost there. We figured we'd just sit tight and see what happened. Then, the message came. "I'm here." We told him we were inside, near the makeup aisle. From where we were sitting, we could see straight into the store. We watched as he walked in, looking around, scanning the aisles for a girl that wasn't real. A minute passed, then another. Then our phone buzzed again. "I can't find you. Are you sure you're at the right Walgreens?" "Yeah, of course. I go here all the time, silly," I replied, trying to make it sound flirty, but we were barely holding in our laughter. We were really leaning into the clueless, ditzy girl act. "I was in the bathroom for a sec. Maybe that's why you missed me. I'm by the vitamins now. Where are you?" We watched our phones, waiting for his response, but curiosity got the better of us. We decided to go inside and casually browse the shelves while sneaking glances at him. If you've ever been inside a Walgreens, you probably know they have those slanted security mirrors up by the ceiling, the kind that let you see across multiple aisles. We spotted him pacing up and down, moving quickly, his head snapping from side to side. His posture was stiff, and he was jabbing at his phone screen aggressively. He looked pissed. Feeling like we were pushing our luck, we hurried back outside and sat down near the red box again, trying to keep our laughter in check. Seconds later, another message popped up. "Is this some kind of joke? I've checked every aisle in this damn store. You're not here." Of course, as immature teenagers, we thought this was hilarious. We couldn't stop grinning as we typed back, "Huh? What do you mean? I'm literally standing in the candy aisle." His response came almost immediately. "You think I'm stupid?" And then, before we could react, he stormed out of the store. He was muttering something under his breath. His lips were moving fast, but we couldn't make out what he was saying. His face, though? Absolutely furious. He stomped across the parking lot, climbed into his car, and pulled out fast, rolling up to the traffic light at the edge of the lot. That's when we lost it. We burst out laughing, thinking we had just pulled off the funniest prank ever. But then, mid-laugh, I noticed something. The guy's window was cracked open, and he was looking right at me. His eyes locked onto mine, and my stomach dropped. The light changed, but instead of driving off, he turned his car sharply, making a U-turn. He was coming back. Panic kicked in instantly. We scrambled to our feet and ran behind the building, cutting through the narrow alley that led to the back streets. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. We didn't stop running until we were sure we were out of sight. By the time we made it to the car, I checked my phone and saw a new message waiting for me. "You were the kids outside, weren't you?" Then another. "You think this is funny?" We didn't stick around to see what would happen next. We sped off, taking side streets, making random turns just in case he had somehow spotted us. When we finally got back home, we deleted the fake account immediately. Looking back, I know what we did was really stupid. I feel terrible for the random girl whose photos we used. And yeah, I feel bad for wasting that guy's time. But at the same time, something about his reaction, his rage, the way he came right back, it makes me think we might have messed with the wrong person. This wasn't just some dude looking for a date. If he had caught us, I don't think he would have just yelled at us. We were lucky. The area we lived in wasn't safe. People got shot here all the time. If we had picked the wrong guy, things could have ended way worse. So yeah, don't be an idiot like we were. Stay safe. My name is Nick, and I work at a tech startup in Houston. Recently, a new coworker joined our team, Shelly. She was friendly, easy to talk to, and had this calm, warm energy that made conversations with her effortless. We had lunch together a few times, nothing serious, just casual chats about work, movies, and random things. I got the sense that we clicked. One evening, as we were wrapping up at the office, she casually invited me over to her place for tea. I didn't think twice before saying yes. The idea of spending time with her outside of work sounded nice, maybe even the start of something more. It wasn't a formal date, but I figured it could turn into one. I imagined a relaxed evening, just the two of us, getting to know each other better in a quieter setting. Her house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Houston, a cozy one-story place with a well-kept lawn and a small porch. The kind of house that made you think of home-cooked meals and peaceful nights. She greeted me at the door with a smile, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, her hair tied back. The inside of her house matched the feeling I had from outside. Warm lighting, a subtle vanilla scent in the air, and soft instrumental music playing in the background. She led me to the kitchen, where she had a collection of ceramic teapots lined up on a shelf. She laughed, saying she had a weird obsession with them, collecting different styles from flea markets and thrift shops. She picked one, a deep blue pot with a delicate floral design, and set about making the tea while I took in the surroundings. There were family pictures on the fridge, Shelly with an older couple, probably her parents, and a few photos with friends at what looked like road trips or parties. Everything about the place felt comfortable, personal. We moved to the living room, sipping tea and talking about movies, music, and random things. She had good taste, classic films, old-school rock, and a bit of jazz. It was easy conversation, the kind that made time slip away. But then, casually, she mentioned something that shifted the mood. "I actually just got out of a relationship," she said, stirring her tea. "It ended a few months ago, but he's not taking it well." I looked at her, waiting for her to elaborate. "He won't let it go," she continued. "He keeps showing up. Outside my work, my house, just sitting in his car. He hasn't done anything yet, but it's getting weird." I felt a twinge of unease. "Have you told anyone? Like the police?" She exhaled, shaking her head. "What can I say? That my ex is sitting in a car outside my house? He's not trespassing. He's not threatening me. He's just there." There was something in her voice, not quite fear, but frustration. Like she had been dealing with this for a while and wasn't sure what to do. I glanced at the window. It was dark outside, and for the first time I became aware of how quiet the street was. My stomach tightened a little. "Maybe you should at least tell someone at work," I suggested. "Just so people know." She nodded but didn't seem convinced. "It's fine," she said, waving a hand. "I just try to ignore it." She grabbed a small remote and turned on some music, bumping up the volume a little. "Let's talk about something else," she said with a smile, changing the subject. I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Shelly's smile faded. She put her teacup down slowly, her eyes flicking toward the door. "That must be my food delivery," she said, but there was hesitation in her voice. I watched as she walked to the door and peeked through the peephole. Her body tensed. She didn't move for a second. Then she took a slow step back. "It's him," she whispered. I stood up. "Your ex?" She nodded, swallowing hard. Her fingers hovered over the doorknob like she was deciding what to do. Another knock, louder this time. "Shelly, I know you're in there," a man's voice called from the other side. Calm, but forced. "Open the door." She shook her head, whispering, "No, no, no." I took a step closer. Should I call someone? She grabbed my wrist. Just stay quiet. Maybe he'll leave. But the knocking turned to pounding. The whole door rattled. Who's in there with you, Shelley? His tone sharpened. I see a car outside. Whose is it? She squeezed my wrist tighter. Just go away, David, she called, trying to sound firm, but her voice shook. Silence. Then, suddenly, the doorknob jerked violently. He was trying to open it. That was it. I pulled out my phone and started dialing 911. Before I could press call, there was a loud crash. The window near the door shattered, and a hand reached through, fumbling for the lock. Shelley screamed. I dropped my phone and lunged forward, slamming my weight against the door just as he tried to shove it open. Then he was inside. David was taller than me, broad-shouldered, with wild eyes and a clenched jaw. He didn't hesitate. The second he saw me, he charged, shoving me so hard I stumbled back and hit the coffee table. You think you can take her from me? He snarled. David, stop! Shelley yelled, grabbing at his arm. He shoved her aside like she was nothing. She hit the floor with a cry. I scrambled to my feet, barely dodging his next punch. I wasn't a fighter, but adrenaline kicked in, and I swung back, catching him in the jaw. It barely fazed him. He grabbed me by the collar and drove his fist into my stomach. Pain exploded through me, and I doubled over. You don't belong here, he growled. Shelley grabbed a lamp from the table and smashed it against his back. He grunted, stumbling forward, giving me just enough time to push him off. Run, Shelley, I gasped. She made it 2 steps before he grabbed her by the wrist and yanked her back. She screamed, struggling against his grip. Then I saw it, the glint of metal in his other hand. A pipe, maybe from his car. I barely had time to react before he swung it. White-hot pain shot through my skull. The room tilted. My knees gave out. I hit the floor. Through the haze, I heard Shelley screaming. Furniture crashing. A struggle. But my body wouldn't move. My vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. The last thing I saw was Shelley, clawing at him, trying to reach my phone. Then everything went black. I woke up to the sound of sirens, flashing red and blue lights, voices, the distant hum of a radio. I was in an ambulance. My head pounded, every muscle in my body aching. Someone was talking to me, but the words didn't make sense. Then I remembered. Shelley. I tried to sit up, but a firm hand pushed me back down. Easy, man. You took a bad hit. A paramedic. I forced the words out. Where's Shelley? The paramedic hesitated. That pause told me everything. Where is she? My voice cracked. He exhaled. She didn't make it. The words hit me harder than the pipe. David had been arrested. The police found him trying to flee the scene, covered in blood. Hers, mine. They told me Shelley had fought. She had fought hard. But by the time help arrived, it was too late. I recovered physically. Mostly. My memory isn't the same. Some things are foggy. I still get headaches. But none of that matters. I think about that night all the time. How I should have done something different. How maybe, if I had been faster, stronger, she'd still be here. I'm writing this now because I need to get it out. And maybe, just maybe, someone else will read this and know when to take the warning signs seriously. Because sometimes, the worst monsters aren't strangers. They're the ones who refuse to let go. In 2019, I was 25 years old when I got a random friend request from a guy. I'll call him Jake. He seemed normal at first, and after a few conversations, he asked me out. I figured, why not? The first 2 dates were decent, nothing too special, but nothing bad either. We planned a 3rd date, but that's when things took a weird turn. I showed up at the agreed spot, waited for almost 2 hours, and he never showed. Then, just like that, he completely disappeared from my life for almost 3 months. Out of nowhere, he unblocked me on every platform and acted like nothing had happened. He kept saying he missed me and wanted to try again. I wasn't sure, but I gave him another chance, something I would soon regret. It didn't take long to find out he was sneaking around with other women behind my back. That was it for me. I told him he could have them and blocked him again. I thought that would be the end of it, but that's when the real nightmare started. For 5 months, nothing happened. Then, by December 2020, my phone wouldn't stop going off. Jake was calling me over 100 times a day, messaging me constantly, even through different numbers. He left voicemails, sent DMs, and even started reaching out to people I knew. It got worse. By early 2021, I realized he had been following me to work, showing up outside my office building, and even calling my boss repeatedly. My boyfriend started getting messages too. It got so intense that my company's HR and security team had to step in. They advised me to get legal help because they were preparing to take him to court for harassment. I followed their advice and got a lawyer. I gathered every message, every call log, and security footage from my workplace. And then, as if the universe had enough of him, in March, Jake was arrested for having meth and cocaine in his car. For a while, things went quiet, and I hoped that was the end. But no, he showed up again, this time in court, facing charges for everything he had done to me. Then came the best news I could have asked for. Between the drug charges and the harassment case, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, 15 for possession, and 5 for stalking me. It felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Jake, I hope you enjoy every second of your sentence. You're never coming near me, my family, or my friends again. And just one last piece of advice: don't drop the soap. I was 25 and had been single for a year. Then, out of nowhere, Josh messaged me. My first love. The guy I hadn't seen in years. We caught up in chat, reminiscing, and eventually, he suggested meeting up. Just to remember the good old days. I said yes. Partly because I was curious about how he was doing, and partly because, honestly, I missed male attention. It had been a while. We decided on the ice rink. Back in high school, we used to go all the time. It felt like a safe, familiar place. When I got there, Josh was already waiting near the entrance, hands stuffed into the pockets of his dark coat. He looked a little different, thinner, sharper, but his smile was the same. For the first few minutes, it was just like old times. Easy. Then we ran into some of my friends, a couple of guys I knew from college, plus one of their girlfriends. I hadn't planned on meeting up with them, but they were there, and it felt natural to skate together. Josh seemed fine with it at first. We laughed, shared school memories, joked about embarrassing moments. It was all lighthearted. But after a while, I started noticing something was off with him. Anytime one of my friends made a joke that involved him, even harmless ones, his jaw tensed. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then he started throwing little jabs back. Nothing too aggressive, but enough that the energy shifted. One of the guys, Mark, teased him about a time in school when Josh had wiped out on the ice in front of everyone. Josh forced a laugh. A minute later, he made a comment about how Mark's job didn't sound like it paid much. Awkward. I tried to steer the conversation away, but it was clear Josh wasn't letting it go. He kept pushing back, like he had something to prove. The friendly banter turned sharper. The air got heavy. At one point, I pulled him aside near the boards. "Hey, everything okay?" He nodded, but his jaw was tight. "Yeah, just didn't expect a group hangout, that's all." I started to apologize, But then he forced a grin. "It's fine. Let's just skate." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But when we went back, I noticed the way he was watching the others. Not just watching, calculating. Mark must have sensed the tension because he tried to lighten the mood. He skated backward, grinning, and said, "All right, let's see if you've still got it, Josh. Race to the other side?" Josh smirked, but there was something off about it. "Yeah," he said. "Let's make it interesting." Mark laughed. "Dude, it's just for fun." Josh didn't respond. He just took off. Mark hesitated, then skated after him. It should have been nothing, just two guys messing around. But Josh wasn't just racing. He was cutting in close, trying to throw Mark off. He even stuck his arm out at one point, making Mark swerve. "Chill, man," Mark said, laughing nervously. Josh didn't. When they reached the end of the rink, Josh shouldered Mark. Not hard enough to knock him over, but enough to make a point. "Still got it," Josh muttered. I skated over, heart sinking. "Josh, seriously, what's up with you?" Before he could answer, another friend, Tyler, skated up, shaking his head. "Dude, you don't have to act like you're proving something. We're just here to have fun." Josh's face darkened. "Yeah? You think I'm trying too hard?" Tyler raised his hands. "I'm just saying." Josh stepped forward, shoving him. It wasn't a playful push. Tyler staggered back, barely keeping his balance on the ice. Mark immediately moved in. "Hey, back off!" And that's when it happened. Josh shoved him hard. Mark's foot caught the ice wrong, and he went down, his head smacking against the frozen surface with a sickening crack. For a second, no one moved. Then Mark groaned, rolling onto his side. I skated toward him, but Josh wasn't done. "Don't step up to me if you can't handle it," he snapped. Tyler grabbed Josh's jacket. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Josh yanked free and swung at him. Tyler ducked, but now other people were watching. Skaters were slowing down, turning their heads. The air was charged, heavy. I reached for Josh's arm. "Enough!" He turned to me, eyes flashing, and I barely had time to react before he shoved me. It wasn't a hard shove, not really. But I was on skates, off balance. My feet flew out from under me, and before I could stop myself, I crashed backward. The last thing I saw was the wooden boards rushing toward me. Then, nothing. I woke up in a hospital bed. The room was too bright, my head was pounding, and when I tried to move, a sharp pain shot through my skull. Someone, maybe a nurse, noticed I was awake. There was movement, muffled voices, the sound of machines beeping. Then a doctor came in, checking my pupils, asking me questions. I answered as best I could, but my thoughts were slow, foggy. How long? My throat was dry. How long was I out? The doctor hesitated. A little over a day. You suffered a severe concussion. There was some swelling, but we were able to stabilize you. I closed my eyes, trying to piece everything together. The rink, Josh, the fight, the fall. A wave of nausea rolled through me. When I opened my eyes again, the doctor was watching me carefully. "There's something else we need to discuss." I didn't like his tone. He continued. "We ran some tests while you were unconscious. The trauma triggered a neurological issue. You experienced a brief seizure after the impact." I stared at him, not fully processing. He kept going. "This isn't something that will just go away. You're going to need medication, regular checkups. There's a chance you may experience further seizures in the future." I felt cold. "Are you saying I have epilepsy?" He hesitated. "Post-traumatic epilepsy. It can develop after head injuries like yours." I couldn't speak. The doctor sighed. "I know this is a lot to take in, "We'll monitor you closely." I barely heard him. This wasn't just an injury. This was permanent. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Nurses came in and out. My parents showed up, worried sick. Friends visited, but not Josh. Not once. I asked about him, and Mark told me later that he left right after the ambulance took me. Didn't go to the hospital. Didn't check in. Just disappeared. A week later, I finally got out of the hospital. I had a prescription, a list of things I had to avoid, and the weight of knowing my life would never be the same. Josh never reached out. No apology. Nothing. I searched for him online once, just to see if he ever thought about what he did. His social media was gone, like he vanished. And maybe that's for the best. Because looking back, I realize I didn't really know him at all. Hey, I'm Elena. I'm 26, and until recently, I never took online dating seriously. It always seemed like one of those things people joked about, funny stories, weird encounters, but not something I'd actually try. But for some reason, one night, I made a profile. Scrolling through endless faces, I eventually matched with a guy named Daniel. He looked normal, decent smile, had a job he seemed to enjoy. After a few days of talking, we decided to meet for drinks. We picked a busy bar in the middle of the city, somewhere public, somewhere that felt safe. When I saw him in person, he seemed exactly as he did online. Polite, easy to talk to, genuinely interested in what I had to say. We covered the usual first date stuff, work, hobbies, random funny stories. There weren't any weird vibes, no awkward moments. I left thinking, yeah, that went well. Then, a few days later, I got a message from a stranger. The account name didn't ring a bell, and the message was short. Stay away from Daniel. He isn't who you think he is. I laughed it off at first, probably just some random troll. People love messing with strangers online. I didn't even know who had sent it, so why would I take it seriously? I brushed it off and kept talking to Daniel. We even planned another date. But the warnings didn't stop. More messages, all from different accounts, all saying nearly the same thing. They weren't just spam. They felt intentional, like someone was trying to get my attention. They hinted at a past I should be worried about. It made me uneasy. But Daniel hadn't done anything strange. No red flags. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. So, I did a little digging. A quick search didn't turn up much, just the usual social media stuff. No big secrets, nothing alarming. But the messages kept coming, and the more I ignored them, the more persistent they became. Each one gnawed at my nerves, making it impossible to ignore the tiny, growing knot of dread in my stomach. A week went by, and an unsettling feeling settled deep in my chest, like I was being watched, or worse, played. Every time my phone vibrated, my stomach twisted, expecting another cryptic message. It felt like someone was actively trying to stop things between Daniel and me before they even had a chance to go anywhere. My mind started spinning scenarios, maybe an ex of his, still bitter and looking for ways to ruin his dating life. But without proof, it was all just guesses. When we met again, I couldn't fully relax. I forced a smile, tried to act like everything was normal, but those messages sat heavy in the back of my mind. Daniel didn't seem to notice anything was off. He was just as charming, just as easy to talk to. Sitting across from him, I struggled to connect the friendly guy in front of me with the ominous warnings I kept receiving. A part of me wanted to ask him outright, "Do you have any idea what's going on?" But I didn't. I didn't want to sound paranoid, especially over a bunch of random anonymous texts. Then, small things started happening. A car I didn't recognize parked outside my apartment more than once, idling just a little too long to be a coincidence. My social media accounts had strange login attempts from places I'd never been. Every time I walked home at night, I felt like someone was just a few steps behind me, always just out of sight. I changed my passwords, tightened my privacy settings, did everything I could think of to shake the paranoia. But the feeling never fully went away. At that point, I decided to step back from dating, at least until I could figure out what was going on. I told Daniel I needed some time, blaming work stress. He took it well. Too well, honestly. If he was involved in any of this, he was doing an incredible job hiding it. And then, just like that, the messages stopped. The weirdness faded. The car stopped showing up. My account stopped getting hacked. It was like someone had just lost interest. I never found out who was behind it. Never learned why they had fixated on me or what their real goal was. But the whole thing left me shaken, made me rethink how much of my life I share online. Even now I wonder, were those warnings real? Or was it all just some elaborate prank by someone with nothing better to do? Either way, I'm done with online dating for a while. I had recently moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, for a new job and a fresh start. Everything felt unfamiliar. The streets, the people, even the air smelled different. Work kept me busy, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to meet someone new. So, I started swiping on one of those dating apps, not expecting much. That's how I met Melissa. She wasn't overly chatty, but she seemed nice enough. Her profile pictures showed a pretty, normal-looking woman. Shoulder-length brown hair, friendly smile. We exchanged a few messages, nothing too deep, and eventually agreed to meet up for dinner. There was a small restaurant off the highway that she suggested. Seemed casual enough. The day of the date, work ran a little late, so I rushed home, changed into something decent, and drove over. The parking lot was half empty, just a few scattered cars under the dim yellow lights. The place was one of those quiet roadside diners, the kind with faded booths and a jukebox in the corner that nobody used. I spotted Melissa through the window before I even stepped inside. She was already seated at a table near the back, but she wasn't alone. A man sat next to her, leaning back in his chair with one arm draped over the backrest. He looked a few years older than me, maybe mid-30s, broad shoulders, shaved head. I hesitated for a second, then pushed the door open and walked in. Melissa smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't the warm kind of smile I expected. More like amusement. The man next to her turned his head slowly, giving me a look that I couldn't quite read. "Hey, you made it," Melissa said. "This is my cousin, George." George stuck out his hand. His grip was firm, almost too firm. "Nice to meet you, man," he said, drawing out the words. I forced a smile and sat down across from them. It was a little weird. This wasn't what I'd signed up for. But I figured maybe she was nervous and wanted someone she trusted nearby. I could roll with it. The waiter came by, dropping off menus. Before I could even open mine, George spoke up. "So, what are we eating?" He tapped the table with a thick finger, glancing at me. Melissa giggled. "George is starving," she said. I nodded, flipping through the menu. The prices weren't bad, but I hadn't planned on buying food for 3 people. Still, I kept quiet. We ordered. Melissa got a salad, George ordered a steak, the most expensive one on the menu, and I picked something simple. The conversation started off normal enough. Small talk about work, the city, nothing too personal. But George dominated the discussion. He spoke loudly, cracking jokes at my expense, nudging Melissa every time he said something he found particularly funny. "You don't talk much, huh?" he said at one point, grinning. "Melissa," You sure this guy's not mute? Melissa laughed but didn't say anything. I chuckled awkwardly and took a sip of my drink. Then George leaned in a little. So, you paying for dinner, right? I blinked, unsure if he was serious. Melissa turned to me. Yeah, you don't mind, do you? The way she said it, it wasn't really a question. Something in my stomach tightened. This wasn't just a casual dinner anymore. It felt like I was being tested. I forced a polite smile. Yeah, sure, I said, hoping to just get through the meal. The food arrived, and George ate like he hadn't seen a meal in days. He kept talking between bites, mostly about himself. I listened, nodding when necessary, but my patience was wearing thin. At some point, George started asking about my job, how much I made. His tone wasn't friendly anymore. It felt more like he was sizing me up. I kept my answers vague. Then he laughed. Man, if I had your job, I'd be ordering way better food than this. He jabbed his fork into his steak. Come on, you're not cheap, are you? Melissa rested her chin on her hand, watching me. Her expression had changed. It wasn't playful anymore. The air felt heavier. I glanced at my watch, then put down my napkin. I think I should get going, I said, reaching for my wallet. Melissa's smile disappeared. You're leaving? She asked. Yeah, it's getting late, I said, keeping my tone light. I'll cover dinner, don't worry. But she wasn't listening. Her expression twisted, and then, out of nowhere, she snapped. You're seriously leaving? Her voice rose, loud enough that a few heads turned from nearby tables. You're just gonna eat and run? Are you really that cheap? George leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His eyes locked onto mine. The restaurant suddenly felt a lot smaller. I pushed my chair back, keeping my voice steady. Look, I don't want any trouble. I just think it's best if I go. George's hand shot out, grabbing my sleeve. His grip was like a vice, his fingers digging into the fabric. You don't just walk out on my cousin like that, he said, voice low, almost calm. But there was nothing friendly about it. Melissa crossed her arms, shaking her head. Unbelievable, she muttered. You really think you can treat people like this? My heart was hammering now. This wasn't just an awkward date anymore. This was something else, something I hadn't prepared for. I yanked my arm back, but George tightened his grip. I said, he repeated, his voice a notch colder. You don't walk out. I was done playing along. I jerked my arm hard, stepping back. Let go of me, I said, louder this time. A couple at another table looked over, but nobody moved. George exhaled through his nose, slow and measured. Then, still holding onto my sleeve, he reached into his jacket with his free hand. Something metallic flashed in the dim light. A knife. I stiffened. Melissa didn't flinch. She just watched. She wasn't scared. She wasn't shocked. She had expected this. My stomach turned cold. George smirked, tilting the knife just enough for me to see the blade. You think you can just show up, eat, and walk away? I forced myself to stay calm. My hands were up, palms open. Look, man, I don't want any problems. I'll pay for the food. I'll even tip extra. Just let me go. Melissa scoffed. It's not about the money. George nodded. Not about the money, he echoed. His grip loosened, just slightly. It's about respect. I swallowed. I don't want any problems, I repeated. But if you don't let me go, I'm calling the cops. That was the wrong thing to say. George's smirk vanished. His eyes darkened. And then he moved. I barely saw the knife coming, but instinct kicked in. I shoved the table forward as hard as I could, sending plates and glasses crashing to the floor. The table slammed into George's stomach, knocking him back just enough for me to bolt. I spun and ran. The restaurant wasn't big, but in that moment, the door felt a mile away. I heard the scrape of a chair, heavy footsteps behind me. Then, pain. Sharp, searing pain ripped through my side. I stumbled, catching myself on a chair. The whole restaurant blurred for a second. My legs felt weak, my breath coming in ragged gasps. George had cut me. I pressed a hand to my side, felt warmth spreading through my shirt. Melissa gasped, fake concern, like an actress in a bad play. "Oh my God, George, what did you do?" But she wasn't running to help me. She wasn't screaming for someone to call 911. She was still standing by the table, eyes cold, detached. George was still coming. I forced my legs to move. One step, another. The exit. I reached for the door handle and nearly collapsed onto the pavement outside. The night air hit me like a slap. People were staring now. A few had stepped out of their cars, unsure of what they were seeing. I gasped out, "Someone, call the police." Then I heard it. The sound of running feet behind me. George wasn't done. I turned just in time to see him lunging, knife still in his hand. Then, the screech of tires. A black SUV slammed to a stop right between us. The driver's side door flew open. A man jumped out, gun drawn. "Drop the knife!" "Police." George froze. Melissa was already backing away, slipping into the shadows like a ghost. George's hand twitched. He looked at me, then at the officer. For a second, I thought he was going to run. Then he dropped the knife. The rest blurred together. More officers arrived. Someone wrapped a towel around my side, pressing down hard. People were talking, asking questions. My hands were shaking too much to answer. Melissa was gone. Nobody saw where she went. George was on the ground, hands behind his head, an officer's knee digging into his back. His face was twisted, not in fear, but in frustration. Like he wasn't mad he got caught. Just mad he didn't finish what he started. I don't remember the ambulance ride. I don't remember much about the hospital, except the doctor saying I was lucky. The cut was deep, but it missed anything vital. A little lower, and I might not have been walking out of there at all. The cops asked me a lot of questions. I told them everything. They already knew George. He had a record. Assault. Robbery. They suspected he and Melissa had done this before. Lured guys into situations where they could intimidate them. Maybe even worse. I don't know if they ever found Melissa. I never used a dating app again. This happened back in 2013, when I first dipped my toes into online dating. I didn't even own a smartphone yet, so my options were pretty much limited to Plenty of Fish and eHarmony. These days, there are tons of apps, but I never really got into them. Thankfully, I'm happily settled now, so I don't have to deal with whatever nightmare the dating world has turned into. That being said, I did have one experience that still unsettles me to this day. I was going through profiles on Plenty of Fish, sending out messages here and there. Back then, there was no swiping. You just browsed a giant list of faces and messaged whoever caught your eye. Most of the time, you'd get no response at all. People either weren't interested or just didn't check their messages. I was about ready to give up when I finally got a reply from a woman named Stephanie. She was engaging, easy to talk to, and kept the conversation flowing. It was a nice change from the usual one-word responses or complete ghosting. We clicked almost immediately, and I found myself genuinely looking forward to talking to her. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet for drinks. It felt like the natural next step, even though the thought of meeting a total stranger still made me a little nervous. This was only my third time going on an online date, so I wasn't exactly a seasoned pro. My first 2 dates had been fine. Nothing special, but nothing awful either. Stephanie gave me her number, and I texted her so she'd have mine. Everything seemed normal. But when the day of our date arrived, she messaged me with a last-minute change. Her cat had apparently fallen ill, and she couldn't leave him alone. She still wanted to meet, though, and suggested I come over to her place instead. I hesitated. It definitely felt a little off, but at the same time, it sounded like a reasonable excuse. After a moment of deliberation, I agreed, and she sent me her address. The building was an older apartment complex, situated near a busy transit hub. When I got there, I stood outside and sent her a quick text to say I'd arrived. Almost immediately, I felt someone behind me. I turned, startled, and there she was, Stephanie, standing way too close. Her face matched the photos, which was a relief. At least I wasn't getting catfished. Still, something about her presence made me uneasy, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. She smiled, unlocked the door, and led me inside. The hallway was dimly lit, the wallpaper peeling at the edges. The elevator groaned as we stepped in, making the whole building feel like it had seen better days. It reminded me a little too much of my own place, small, old, and a little unsettling. When we reached her apartment on the 4th floor, Stephanie opened the door and ushered me in. She quickly excused herself to use the bathroom, leaving me alone in the living room. That's when I noticed something off. I could hear her talking, very clearly, from one of the bedrooms. The weird part? She hadn't mentioned having a roommate, but I figured it could happen. It would have been awkward if someone else was living there, though, especially since she'd told me her cat was sick. And if there was someone else around, why didn't they just take care of the cat instead? I tried to shake off the weird feeling creeping up on me, but then I realized something even stranger. There was no sign of a cat anywhere. No toys, no food dishes, nothing. And even more unsettling, there wasn't a single strand of cat hair on the couch or the floor. I've had pets before, so I know how impossible it is to get rid of pet hair. It's everywhere, even when you try to clean. So, why wasn't there any? My gut was telling me something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The more I listened, the more anxious I became. Finally, I stood up and quietly made my way to the door. As soon as I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, I heard something strange. There were heavy footsteps coming from one of the bedrooms, definitely not the light steps of someone like Stephanie. It sounded like a big guy, maybe even a man. I froze, waiting for the elevator in the hallway. Just then, I heard the apartment door crack open. A man's head peeked out, and our eyes briefly met before the door shut again, locking with a loud click. I didn't stick around to figure out what was going on. That place was off, and I had no intention of sticking around any longer. I rushed outside and pulled out my phone, half expecting a message from Stephanie explaining things. But there was nothing. No new texts, no missed calls. Honestly, I wasn't planning to reach out to her. I just wanted to forget about the whole thing. But when I checked my messages, everything was gone. All of her messages, gone. Even her profile on Plenty of Fish had vanished, either deleted or blocked. It was like she'd scrubbed herself from my life completely. It felt eerie, like she wanted to erase the fact that I was ever there. Looking back, the red flags were clear, but I'd been too caught up in the moment to notice. The sudden change of plans, the man I saw, and the complete lack of any cat-related things were enough to make me realize I'd narrowly avoided a much worse situation. I never found out what really happened in that apartment, but I'm just glad I made it out. Every time I think about that night, I'm thankful I'm not out there dating anymore. From what I've heard, online dating has only gotten crazier. For those of you still trying to find someone, just take this as a warning. Be careful, because sometimes the signs are there, but you've got to see them before it's too late. I never saw myself as someone who would dive into online dating. It always felt too artificial, like something that belonged in movies rather than real life. But after watching a few friends find serious relationships, and even marriages, through dating apps, I figured, why not? Weekends had started feeling lonely, and I was tired of watching Netflix alone. So, after some hesitation, I finally downloaded the app that everyone seemed to be using and began swiping through profiles. After a couple of weeks, I matched with a guy named Ryan. His profile wasn't flashy, which I liked. He had a normal job in IT, some hobbies that lined up with mine, and didn't try too hard to impress. We hit it off over messages, exchanging jokes and long conversations, and it wasn't long before we agreed to meet in person. We settled on a little cafe downtown, a place I had been to a handful of times. It had a cozy atmosphere with brick walls, plants hanging from the ceiling, and the kind of coffee that made you want to stay for hours. I showed up a little nervous, unsure of what to expect. But when Ryan arrived, I felt relieved. He looked exactly like his pictures, which was a relief because I'd heard too many horror stories about catfishing. The date itself went well. Better than I had expected, honestly. Conversation flowed effortlessly, like I was catching up with someone I'd known for years. After we finished our drinks, we strolled through a few nearby stores before saying our goodbyes. He suggested meeting again, and I agreed, feeling like this could turn into something real. A few days later, I was at the grocery store near my apartment when I spotted him again. He was in the produce section, poking at some avocados. Seeing someone you just went on a date with in an everyday setting was a little weird, but we ended up chatting for a bit. He joked that our second date was happening right there in the store, which made me laugh. At the time, I chalked it up to coincidence and didn't think much of it. The following weekend, I went to my favorite park for a morning jog. It was one of those perfect autumn days, the air crisp and fresh, the sky a bright blue. As I rounded a bend, I spotted him again. Ryan, sitting on a bench, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I passed, smiled, and said he was just out enjoying the weather. We exchanged a few words about our weekend plans before I continued on my way. By this point, though, something felt off. 3 chance meetings in a short time? I wasn't sure if I was overthinking it, or if Ryan was showing up in my life a little too often. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. We just lived in the same area, right? Maybe it was all a coincidence, and it was bound to happen. But as weeks went by, it just kept happening. I'd see him at my favorite lunch spot, then at the local bookstore, and even at the gym. It felt like he was always a step behind or just around the corner. At first, I ignored it. I mean, the city isn't tiny, so a few run-ins at familiar places didn't seem all that strange. But the more it happened, the more uncomfortable I got. There's no way this was just some random chance anymore. It started feeling like he was purposefully showing up wherever I went. I talked to some friends about it, and they said I was overthinking things. Maybe we just liked the same places, they said. But I couldn't shake the gut feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the frequency of the encounters. It was the way he always seemed to be there exactly when I was. So one night, I decided to test it. I took a completely different route home from work, one I'd never used before. It only added 10 minutes to my commute, but I needed to see if anything would change. Sure enough, as I turned onto my street, there he was. On the opposite side of the road, just casually walking. We made eye contact and he waved, but this time I didn't stop. I kept walking, heart pounding in my chest. That's when it hit me. How did he know I'd be there? Was he somehow tracking my movements? Or was this just a bizarre coincidence? I started thinking about all the stuff I posted online. Instagram stories, check-ins, tagged photos with locations. It made sense, in a creepy way, that he could be using that to piece together my routine. I felt like I needed to do something, so I decided to stop responding to his messages for a while. I tightened my privacy settings on social media, made everything more private, and stopped posting about my daily life altogether. For a couple of weeks, everything went quiet, and I started to relax. Maybe it really was just a fluke. But then, one Sunday morning, as I walked into my usual workout spot, there he was again. I pretended to be glued to my phone, hoping he wouldn't see me. But it was clear now. These weren't random run-ins. He was showing up at the same places I always went, at the exact same times. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to change things up. I couldn't keep pretending this was nothing. I started adjusting my routine, switching up times, choosing different locations. I even found a new gym and started running in a park on the other side of town. It was a pain, but it felt like the only way to be safe. Eventually, the sightings stopped. I'm not sure if he realized I caught on, or if he just lost interest. Either way, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't the kind of scary situation you see in movies, but it was unsettling enough to remind me to be careful with what I share online, and trust my instincts when something doesn't feel right. So, yeah, that's my story. Nothing crazy, but it definitely taught me a lesson. If you find yourself in a similar spot, just remember to stay aware and trust your gut. You never know when something might be off. My name is Jake, and this happened about 3 weeks ago in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I had recently started chatting with a girl named Brianna on a Latino dating app called Chispa. She lived in a small town nearby that most people wouldn't recognize, Los Lunas. It was a Saturday, and I had planned to drive into Albuquerque, about an hour away, to do some DoorDash since I was short on cash. Right before I left, Brianna called me and asked if I could give her a ride to a friend's house in Albuquerque since I was already heading that way. I figured it wasn't a big deal, so I agreed, and we took off. Once we got to her friend's place, she hopped out, and I got to work. I was delivering orders for a few hours, and then, as the sun started to set around 7:45 p.m., I got a message from Brianna on WhatsApp. She told me she and her friend were going to visit the friend's mom and sister, who lived just a few minutes down the road, and asked if I could pick her up there in about an hour. I told her that was fine and kept working. About 30 minutes later, she sent me her live location and explained that she had accidentally left her purse at her friend's place. Some guy, apparently a family friend, offered to take her back to grab it and then bring her right back. But after they got the purse, she messaged me again, saying the guy suddenly changed directions and started driving the opposite way, telling her he was taking her to his place instead. She added that he was driving a gray pickup truck. The second I read that, I sped toward her location. But every time I got close, her location would shift again because the truck kept moving. I was starting to panic when, finally, I got lucky. I spotted them pulling out of a drive-through liquor store. Brianna must have seen me in the rearview mirror because suddenly, the guy pulled over to the side of the road. That gave me just enough time to cut him off with my little Kia Soul. Luckily, her door was unlocked, and the moment the truck stopped, she threw it open and ran straight to my car. As soon as she got in, I hit the gas, getting us out of there as fast as possible. This might not sound like a typical horror story or some online dating nightmare, but at that moment, my heart was racing like never before. I didn't know what that guy's intentions were, but they definitely weren't good. As soon as Brianna got in my car, she broke down, crying and shaking, thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't found her. I've been in my fair share of dangerous situations, but fearing for someone else's safety, someone you actually care about, is a completely different kind of terror. I had been working at the warehouse for almost 8 years when I met Jonah. He was a quiet guy, barely said a word to anyone. He stood about 6 feet tall, probably weighing somewhere between 160 and 180 pounds. His skin was always tanned, and he had this odd bowl-cut hairstyle that looked straight out of the 90s. He mostly kept to himself during breaks, but was one of the best workers I'd ever seen. Never messed up, never caused trouble, and always had a polite attitude whenever we did talk. Over time, he and I started chatting more, slowly becoming friends. He had this habit of blasting country music while he worked, which drove me crazy. We worked in a dry goods warehouse, and sometimes, even from a few aisles away, I could hear the twang of his songs. I'd shout, "Turn that crap down," and he'd yell back, laughing, "Nah, screw you." It was all just harmless messing around. The more we hung out, the more he opened up, especially when we hit the bar after work. He'd tell me about sneaking into his girlfriend's house late at night. He was 22, and the girl, well, she was definitely younger. Maybe 17, maybe 16. It felt a little weird to me, but Jonah was kind of a weird guy in general. To be honest, I wasn't sure he was all there. He had trouble saying certain basic words and struggled with simple math, like adding or subtracting. Maybe he had a learning issue or something. He started coming over to my place after work, spending hours playing Gears of War online while drinking beer. He even showed up at some of the local shows where my band played. We did all the usual stuff guys in their 20s do. After a couple of years, I finally met his girlfriend, Kara. She was cute, clearly in love with him, but she barely spoke, at least not around him. When she and my wife chatted in the kitchen, Jonah and I stayed in the living room, gaming as usual. That's when he casually dropped the news. Kara was pregnant. I was stunned when Jonah told me about Kara being pregnant. They were both so young, but they seemed happy, and I didn't want to judge. By 2012, I had my first kid, and I remember thinking how much different life felt. Jonah's kid, Clayton, was about 4 years old at the time. He looked so much like his dad, especially with that same goofy grin Jonah always had. It was a regular Saturday when they came over to hang out. The kids ran around, while we cracked open a few beers and sat on the front porch. Everything felt normal, at least on the surface. Jonah didn't say anything about problems with Kara, no mention of any fights or anything wrong between them. He was just himself, laughing and joking around like always. He left around 9 p.m., and I figured I'd just head to bed once the night wound down. But not long after he left, my phone rang. It was Sarah, an old girlfriend from before I got married. She knew Jonah, so I assumed she was just calling to catch up. But then she said something that hit me like a ton of bricks. "He killed Kara," she said, "and took off with his kid." I froze. No way. Jonah? Kill someone? He was the last person I'd ever expect to do something like that. We'd known each other for years, and I'd never once seen him lose his temper, let alone hurt anyone. He was a gentle giant, always laughing, always friendly. There was no way it was true. But when Sarah told me the details, I couldn't process it. Apparently, when Jonah got home that night, things went south fast. They fought, and at some point, he punched Kara in the throat. I don't know if it was out of rage or panic, but it crushed her windpipe, and she suffocated. Afterward, he put her body in her car, drove it out into the countryside, and set it on fire. He staged it like an accident, running the car off the road. Then, he sprinted home, losing one of his shoes along the way. He grabbed Clayton, who was still asleep, and just vanished. Jonah fled to Kentucky with his son, but it didn't take long before they tracked him down. He was arrested within 48 hours. The weird part? He's only getting 5 years. I guess there's a petition going around to keep him locked up longer, but for now, he's scheduled to get out soon. I got Tinder a few years after it blew up. I was 24 at the time, living in a house with 3 other guys I barely spoke to. That period of my life was lonely. I had moved to a new city where I didn't know a soul. My roommates had their own thing going on, so most nights, I just sat in my room, bored out of my mind. I knew Tinder had a reputation as a hookup app, but I wanted something more than that, even if it sounded dumb. So, I wasn't just swiping right on the prettiest girls. I was saying yes to almost everyone. Maybe I got lucky, but in the first few days, I ended up with over 10 matches. I was still trying to figure out who to message first when one of them beat me to it. That surprised me because I thought girls never messaged first. I got excited and replied right away. We talked for about an hour before I suggested meeting up, and she agreed. Her name was Lily. She was 21, and she had curly blonde hair. She was a college student, and her photos looked like they belonged in a magazine, almost too polished. When I told her where I lived, she suggested meeting at a park not too far away. She never mentioned where she stayed, but I figured it had to be close if she picked that spot. On the night of our date, I heated up some leftover pasta in the microwave, ate in my room, and left without saying a word to my roommates. It was late fall, chilly but not unbearable. I wore a hoodie under a heavy jacket, but I left it unzipped. As I walked to the park, a white van drove past me. I didn't think much of it at first, but then it passed me again. This time, slower. I turned my head to look, but the angle made it hard to see the driver. The van eventually disappeared down the street, and I kept walking. About 5 minutes later, I reached the park entrance, and there it was, the same white van parked along the curb. My stomach twisted a little. Great, now some weirdo in a van was watching me. But I wasn't about to ditch the date over something like that. I made my way through the park, heading to the bench where Lily and I had agreed to meet. I pulled out my phone, checking for any messages from her, but there was nothing. I figured I'd wait a little longer. I didn't want to come off as too eager. Right when our meeting time hit, my phone buzzed. It was Lily, telling me to meet her on the other side of the park instead. I didn't get why she couldn't just come to the spot we agreed on, but whatever. It wasn't a big deal. As I started walking, I passed the van again. This time, I noticed the side door was cracked open just a little. That set off a small alarm in my head. As I got closer, the door suddenly slid open all the way. A man stepped out, older, rough-looking. I barely had time to react before he lunged at me. I jumped back, but he grabbed the sleeve of my jacket, his grip tightening. I tried to break free, but the guy's grip was too tight. He had a hold on my arm with one hand and was trying to grab my other arm with the other. I knew I was in trouble. This dude was a lot bigger than me, and with that creepy van right there, I realized if he managed to get me into it, I was done. In a panic, I yanked my arm out of my jacket, rolling on the ground to get away. Once I was free, I scrambled back, putting some distance between us. He just stood there by the van, staring at me. He still had my jacket in his hand, but surprisingly, he didn't chase me down. Strong guy, sure, but he didn't seem to have the stamina for a run. I didn't stick around to see if he was going to make another move. I turned and sprinted away. I didn't stop running until I hit a more crowded street, away from the park. I quickly glanced over my shoulder to check if he was following, but there was no one behind me. The van was still parked though, a little ways off, but it didn't look like it had moved. I was almost home, walking along a busier road where there were bars and fast food joints, when I spotted the van again. It rolled by, slow at first, and then slowed even more as it passed me. I looked over, and the driver's side window was down. And there he was, the same man who had attacked me. For a second, our eyes locked, and I felt this bone-chilling wave rush over me. His face was twisted, but his eyes were the worst part. They were so cold, it was like they were drilling into me. And I knew, deep down, this guy had bad intentions. I tried to catch a glimpse of the van's license plate, but it was covered by something, so I couldn't make it out. I just stood there frozen, watching as the van disappeared down the street. My heart was still pounding. I couldn't believe how close I had come to something terrible. The excitement of meeting this girl had quickly turned into a nightmare. I pulled my phone out and called the police, telling them everything about the van, the man, what had happened. I gave them every detail I could remember, but even as I hung up, I wasn't sure they'd find him. I didn't head home right away. I kept scanning the street for the van, not wanting to lead that guy straight to my door. Once I was sure it was clear, I made my way home and went straight to my room. It wasn't until then that I even bothered to open Tinder again. I blocked Claire, or whatever her real name was. I was pretty sure by then she wasn't real, and when I looked at our chat, there was a new message from her. It just said, "Nice jacket." It sent a chill through me. That sicko was messing with me. I screenshot the message and sent it to the cops, but didn't reply to him. After that, I stayed away from Tinder for a long time. Eventually, I gave it another shot and had a few decent experiences, but I never forgot that night. So, yeah. Be careful out there. This happened back in 2019. My friends and I had planned a trip to Virginia Beach for a week of sun, drinks, and fun. A few days before we left, I got on Tinder and adjusted my location to see the kind of guys in the area. Just for curiosity, you know? I ended up matching with this good-looking guy, and we started chatting. He seemed normal enough, funny, charming, nothing weird. We talked about meeting up once I got to town, and I was kind of excited about it. Fast forward to the trip, and one night, he finally asked if I wanted to go out. The only problem? He couldn't meet until after 11 p.m. That should have been my first warning sign, but I was on vacation, and honestly, I wasn't opposed to a little late-night fun. Plus, free drinks sounded like a win. He suggested we meet at this sushi spot near the pier, but when we arrived, they were closing up. Not a big deal, though. He immediately recommended a tequila bar a few blocks away. As we walked there, he suddenly stopped and patted his pockets. "Shit, I forgot my ID," he said. That was red flag number 2. I hesitated, thinking maybe I should just call it a night. If he couldn't get in, what was the point? But he brushed it off, saying they always let him in. Against my better judgment, I shrugged and went along with it. We got to the bar, took the elevator up, and, surprise, surprise, they wouldn't let him in. He laughed it off like it was no big deal and suggested we just go back to his place, grab a few beers, and chill. At that point, I should have just left. But I'd spent time getting dressed up, and I figured, why not? We drove separately to his place, which seemed fine. We sat around drinking, playing music, and smoking a little. One of my friends even called to check in on me, which I was grateful for. So far, everything felt pretty normal. After a while, the drinks and smoke had me feeling relaxed, and things naturally escalated. We ended up on his bed, making out, and it was all going well, until it wasn't. Things got heated, and as he reached for protection, I had to stop him. I have a severe latex allergy, and the second I told him that, his entire vibe shifted. So here's where things really took a turn. After I told him about my latex allergy, he kind of paused. There was this awkward silence. I was just laying there, trying to figure out how to keep things chill. Then out of nowhere he says, "Well, if I can't sleep with you, guess I'll just have to kill you." I couldn't even process what he just said. He literally grabbed me by the neck and started squeezing. I've been on my fair share of dates, and I've had some weird encounters, but this was the first time I was genuinely scared for my life. I could feel my heart racing as he tightened his grip. My vision started to blur, and I thought, this is it. I'm done. I managed to snap out of it though, and used all my strength to pull his arm off of me. I had to shout, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Somehow, I kept my voice steady, even though my body was shaking. He stopped, just stared at me for a second, and then said, "Relax. I was just joking." I was furious at that point. You don't joke about stuff like that with someone you just met. You don't joke about killing someone at all, I snapped. He kept insisting that he didn't mean it, saying stuff like, "I didn't rape you, did I?" And I was like, "No, you didn't, because nothing even happened." But the fact that he kept saying that over and over just felt wrong. It wasn't like he was trying to reassure me. He was just trying to make himself feel better. Inside, I was panicking. He was still holding on to me like he wasn't going to let go anytime soon. All I wanted to do was run. I needed to get the hell out of there and back to my hotel, where I felt safe. Finally, he got up to go to the bathroom, and that was my chance. I rushed to get dressed, didn't even bother with my shoes or underwear. I just grabbed my stuff and bolted out of there. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. As I was walking back to the hotel, my phone kept buzzing nonstop. It was him. Calls and texts, all about how he didn't do anything wrong and he was just joking. I was shaking, but I told him straight up that I was uncomfortable and he needed to leave me alone. I didn't care about him worrying about the cops or whatever. I just wanted him out of my life. I told him to lose my number and never contact me again. By the time I finally made it back to the hotel, it was around 4 a.m. One of my friends was still up, and I told her everything. She said she had a feeling something was off, which is why she stayed awake. I was so grateful for that. After everything that happened, I just couldn't believe I made it out okay. The rest of my vacation ended up being fine, but I'll never forget that night. Ladies, always trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. That's my lesson from the weird Tinder guy in Myrtle Beach. Seriously, don't ever contact me again. I used to live in a small rural town in Texas about 3 years ago. It was one of those places where everyone knew each other, and not much ever happened. Out of boredom, I started using Tinder, just swiping to see who was around. That's when I came across this guy. He was attractive and looked a couple of years older than me. I had just turned 21. Let's call him Jake. I swiped right, and we matched instantly. That's when I noticed something strange. He was only a few blocks away. I was always careful with guys I met online, mostly because of bad experiences in past relationships. We started messaging, but for some reason, I didn't feel as talkative as I normally would be. There was something about Jake that didn't sit right with me, though I couldn't explain why. During our conversations, I learned that he was training to become a police officer. After a few days of small talk, he asked if I wanted to meet up. That weird feeling in my stomach told me no, but I agreed. Only if we met somewhere public. The night before we were supposed to hang out, Jake messaged me at almost midnight, asking if he could come over to my place instead. That was my first real warning sign. I told him no and reminded him that we already had plans to meet the next day. He didn't like that answer. He kept pushing, saying it would be quick, and even compared me to his ex, saying she acted the same way. That's when I knew. Something about this guy wasn't right. I held firm and told him no again. The next day came, and just like I thought, Jake didn't show up. I wasn't surprised, so I just went on with my day, thinking that was the end of it. Later, I was browsing Tinder again and saw that Jake had liked me. For some reason, I swiped right again. I was younger and maybe a bit naive, but I called him out on his strange behavior. He responded by saying he wanted me, and that I should want him too, since he was good-looking. I just laughed it off and blocked him. A couple of days later, I saw that Jake had created a new account. This time, it said he was in the military. I swiped right again, just to tell him to stop making new profiles and bothering me. Thankfully, I had never shared my number or any of my social media with anyone from Tinder, which I'm sure kept things from escalating faster. Jake told me again that he really wanted me and tried to convince me that we could be friends with benefits. I immediately shut it down and said I'd call the cops if he didn't stop. That did the trick, and he left me alone after that. Then, a few months later, I saw him at my workplace. I was behind a counter, just trying to keep busy until he left. I happened to look up and made eye contact with him, which was a huge mistake. We were both wearing masks at the time, so I just tried to act like I didn't recognize him. Thankfully, he didn't seem to notice me at all. I thought that was the end of it. But then, a few days later, a couple of coworkers mentioned they'd talked to Jake. Apparently, he was being super sweet to them, asking for their social media. But they all had a weird vibe about him and refused to give him anything. When I told them what had happened to me, they were all shocked. Honestly, we all agreed that we dodged a major bullet. I grew up in a quiet little town in Kentucky. Right after I finished high school at 19, I started dating a guy in his mid-20s from a city a couple of hours away. He was tall, built like an athlete, and had a face that made people do double takes. For this story, I'll call him Jake. On our first date, he casually mentioned that he used to be involved with one of the most infamous gangs in the country. He explained that he got caught up in it as a teenager because of where he lived. He said there weren't many choices for kids like him. He had proof, too. He knew all the gang signs, had tattoos linked to them, and even had some scars from fights. I looked up the tattoos and symbols online, just to make sure he wasn't making it up. Some people lie about being in gangs for attention, but Jake didn't seem like the type to do that. He was always polite, never made me feel uneasy, and treated me with nothing but respect. So, I didn't think much of it. We had been dating for a few weeks when I learned the truth about him. One night, I finally agreed to stay over at his place. I had been taking things slow, not because of his past, but because I like to be cautious. It was my first time sleeping at his apartment since I usually needed a little more time before feeling comfortable enough to do that. I also had a busy schedule, so I hadn't had the chance before. That evening felt completely normal at first. We ordered takeout, watched some movies, and just hung out. But then his best friend showed up unexpectedly. That's when things started feeling off. It was weird to have a friend over when it was the first night I was staying there, right? Later, in private, I found out something that made my stomach drop. Jake's friend used to be in a rival gang. And not just any rival gang, but the one that had been at war with his old crew for years. I know everyone has a past, and I try not to judge people based on it. But Jake telling me about his gang background like it was nothing really threw me off. It was weird that he brought it up so suddenly, and the fact that he didn't even mention his friend would be at the apartment that night just made it feel even stranger. To make matters worse, Jake's friend confirmed that he and Jake had both been part of the same gang years ago. That was when my unease started to grow. After his friend left, Jake and I hung out in his room, and that's when I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. I don't think I'll ever forget it. Jake had a whole collection of weapons in his closet. I'm not talking about a couple of handguns or a hunting rifle. I mean an actual arsenal. There were grenades, a bulletproof vest, and even an AK-47 or something similar. That was the second major red flag of the evening. I didn't know what to think at that point, but I tried not to panic. Later that night, while we were in bed, he casually dropped something that still makes my blood run cold. He looked at me, completely serious, and admitted that he was still part of the gang he claimed to have left behind. And as if that wasn't enough, he went on to tell me he was actually a hitman for the gang. He said it so calmly, like it was no big deal, almost as if he was telling me about his day. He even added that while he wasn't active at the moment, he would still take jobs if they came up. It felt like a punch to the stomach. He said all of this without any emotion in his eyes, his voice steady, almost robotic. I could tell right away that this guy was seriously messed up. I didn't believe he was making it up. I've met people who lie for attention, but Jake wasn't one of them. He didn't have that vibe at all. I stayed that night, mostly because I didn't want to make a scene or act rashly. But I knew right then that I couldn't keep seeing him. The next morning, I left and didn't look back. He didn't try to contact me after that, and I never reached out to him either. The whole situation was just too terrifying, and I had no intention of getting any deeper into it. People might wonder why I didn't just leave right then and there when he told me about being a hitman. Honestly, I didn't think it was a good idea to freak out or start yelling. I didn't feel like he was directly threatening me, but I knew exactly what kind of person he was. He gave off that unsettling vibe, the kind you get from people who've done terrible things without thinking twice. It's a feeling you just know, and I've felt it before with other people. Even though he treated me well and was always polite, I wasn't about to stay with someone like that, no matter how attractive he was. A strange thing happened to me a few years back, and I'll do my best to recall everything correctly. I had been using Hinge for a while, but nothing ever came of it. Just a bunch of dead-end conversations. Then one night, I matched with someone named Olivia. She was almost too perfect, the kind of pretty that makes you second-guess if she's real. We hit it off right away, and she seemed just as interested in me as I was in her. I'm usually good at spotting fake profiles, but hers seemed legit. Still, something nagged at me, like an itch in the back of my brain telling me to double-check. She didn't link any socials, but she did mention where she worked, and one of her pictures showed her at a college graduation. That gave me just enough to figure out where she had studied and what year she graduated. A quick Facebook search later, and I found her profile. Everything lined up. The photos matched, and the account had been around since 2010. This was in 2023, so that meant the profile wasn't some quick throwaway. I debated sending her a friend request or a message, just to be sure, but I didn't want to come off as weird or make her think I was stalking her. Instead, I decided to just go with it. After messaging back and forth for a few days, I asked her out. She agreed and suggested we meet at a small tea shop downtown. I'd never been there before, but it wasn't far, maybe a 10-minute ride on the bus. I showed up a few minutes early and stood outside, but something was off. The place was closed. It was around 7:30 p.m., and according to Google, the tea shop shut down at 5 on weekends. I figured maybe she didn't realize and would be here soon. I'd just wait and suggest another spot. Then my phone buzzed. It was Olivia. She texted saying she had just noticed the tea shop was closed and asked if I could meet her in the grocery store parking lot next door. That place was shut down for the night too, but I figured maybe she had parked there, and we could find a bar or something nearby. I wasn't about to get into a stranger's car, though. I'm not that careless. The lot was just a short walk away, so I made my way over and took a quick look. Almost empty. Just one car parked far in the back with its headlights on. Something didn't feel right. My gut told me to leave, but I stepped a little closer anyway. As I approached, I peered through the windshield, and that's when I saw him. A man sitting in the driver's seat, staring right at me. At that moment, I knew something was seriously off. I quickly snapped a photo with my phone, then turned and bolted the other way. I had no idea if the picture would help, but I figured it was better than nothing. The photo was blurry, and the car's license plate was too hard to make out, but I had to try. Honestly, at the time, I figured I would just forget about the whole thing. No harm done, right? I went home feeling let down, but it wasn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Later, when I checked Hinge again, I saw that Olivia had blocked me. Not a huge shock. I knew by then that it was probably some guy behind the profile. But then I remembered the real Olivia's Facebook account. I logged in, and sure enough, I was still friends with her. I still thought the whole thing was legitimate, and if someone was using her pictures to mess with people, I felt like I should at least let her know. So I sent her a message explaining what had happened to me. She replied the next day. Olivia told me she didn't even have a Hinge account, so someone had clearly stolen her identity to mess with guys. She asked if I had seen the person and wanted every detail. I told her I had, but I didn't get a good look at his face. I attached the photo I took of the car, not really expecting it to help. Her response hit me like a ton of bricks. She immediately recognized the car and the guy in the front seat, even though the image wasn't clear. She said it was her stepfather. He had been using her photos to catfish people on dating apps. I was seriously creeped out. Olivia and I kept messaging after that, trying to figure out how it all went down. She was understandably freaked out and embarrassed by what her stepdad had done. We talked about possible scenarios, but she was always firm that he wouldn't have hurt me. I get why she'd say that. She probably didn't want to believe he was capable of more. But I don't know. A guy who's messed up enough to do something like that doesn't seem like the type to stop at harmless pranks. What would he have done if I had gotten in that car? Just tell me. Gotcha. No way. I feel like he was planning something worse, and I just got lucky enough to walk away. It's like something in my gut told me to leave before things went further. I'm pretty sure he's a danger, and even though he didn't do anything to me directly, I think he needs to be watched. Olivia didn't want to press charges or anything, so I knew the cops couldn't do much. Maybe it's illegal to steal someone's identity, but unless he hurt someone, there wasn't much they could do. My biggest worry now is that this guy's still out there doing who knows what, and I hope someone's keeping an eye on him. He's seriously messed up. I usually keep my dating stories to myself unless they're hilarious or painfully awkward, the kind my friends love hearing over brunch. But there was one experience that made me rethink dating apps completely. I had always been optimistic about dating, believing even the worst experiences had some silver lining. Even in my late 30s, I never lost faith that I'd meet the right person. I took care of my appearance, exercised regularly, and had a job that required me to be outgoing. Even on days when I didn't feel my best, I could turn on the charm like a switch. After a busy stretch at work managing a new showroom launch, I felt like I was on top of the world. I'd been traveling a lot, things were going well, and it seemed like a good time to jump back into dating. That spring, I started going on dates more often and had been chatting with a guy named Matt on Bumble. He lived about an hour away, had decent pictures, no bio, but seemed friendly enough. We had planned to meet, but life got in the way, and the conversation fizzled out. I eventually unmatched him when we stopped talking. Weeks later, Matt reappeared on my app while I was at work, and we matched again. We had some small talk about work and the warm spring weather. He told me his job had him traveling across Pennsylvania as a company rep. The state has a major highway running through it, making it easy to get from one side to the other. He mentioned he'd be driving through my town soon and suggested stopping by. My stomach tightened. It was that uneasy feeling you get when someone shows up at your house unannounced, except worse because this was a total stranger from an app. I quickly shut it down. I told him I was busy and that my workplace wasn't somewhere people could just drop in uninvited. I suggested we meet at a cafe, somewhere public, where I'd feel safe. He agreed right away, and I thought that would be the end of it. I wasn't really worried. He knew I worked in a showroom, but I hadn't told him exactly where it was. As he kept joking about showing up at my work, though, something didn't sit right. I started to get the feeling he wasn't taking me seriously. So, I went outside for a bit to get some fresh air. My building was part of a small industrial complex, and by that time on a Friday, most businesses were closed for the weekend. It was normal for me to be there alone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Trusting my gut, I decided to check his profile on Bumble again. To my shock, this guy, who I thought was over an hour away, was now listed as being only a couple miles from me. At that moment, I realized how precise Bumble's location tracking was. It showed exactly where he was. The showroom I worked at was in a quiet, rural area, surrounded by fields and a few other small businesses. The place was tiny, maybe a square mile, and there were a couple houses further down the road. Honestly, it was the kind of place you wouldn't expect anyone to just pop by. The fact that he was so close to me made my stomach drop. I quickly headed back inside, locked the door, and decided to move my car. My plan was to park it further down the estate, lock up, and make it look like no one was around. It wasn't much, but I figured it would help. The building didn't have any windows at the front, so I could hide out of sight. As I hurried to the door with my keys, I suddenly heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel. Someone was driving up to the entrance. My heart raced. I realized I was too late to lock up the shutters now. The car stopped. I heard a door slam, and then I saw him, John from Bumble. I froze. He looked so different in person, scruffy, with dirty shoes and a stubbled face. He didn't seem nervous or apologetic at all. Instead, he walked toward me like he owned the place. "What are you doing here?" I called out, trying to stay calm. "I told you not to come here." He just laughed, like it was no big deal. "It wasn't hard to find you. Bumble's location is pretty accurate, and I figured I'd swing by. Nice showroom you've got here." He looked around, then came way too close for comfort, standing way too near me. My confidence completely evaporated. I tried to keep it together, showing him some of the products we sold, talking about features, walking him around the showroom as I went. But he was right there, way too close, a creepy smile plastered on his face. It was obvious he wasn't interested in anything I had to say. Instead, he started with comments like, "You're way better looking in person, I gotta say." Then, with a big grin, he casually added, "I'm making you nervous, huh?" I wasn't sure how to respond at first, so I just said, "Yeah, you are. And honestly, I'd like you to leave now." He seemed to get a kick out of that. "I'm not leaving until I get a kiss," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Then he reached for my arm, trying to touch me. I was furious, but I had to keep my cool. I knew I had to play it smart if I wanted him gone. I turned, pretending to walk away toward the office to grab my phone. But then, out of nowhere, he slapped me hard on my backside. I froze. Before I could react, he grabbed my waist and tried pulling me toward him. My body went into full alert mode. Everything screamed that I needed to get away. I pushed him off, my hand on his back, shoving him toward the big roller door. He just smiled, as if this was some sick joke to him, and then reached for my neck, trying to force his lips on mine. My instincts took over, and I shoved him away, hitting him in the face. I shouted for him to leave, hoping he'd be scared off. I even pretended I was about to call for help, though I knew no one was around to hear me. To my surprise, he actually stepped back, got in his car, and drove off. I locked up the showroom quickly and went into the office. Instead of immediately blocking him, I kept watching his location as he drove farther away. I couldn't help myself. I was freaked out, but a part of me felt like maybe it was over. I called my brother, and he insisted I call the cops, but I brushed it off. "He's gone. Don't worry about it," I told him, though my heart was still racing. I kept checking his location all afternoon. Then, later that evening, I saw him driving back toward my area. By then, I'd locked everything up tight, and sure enough, I saw his car pull up again, trying to get into the showroom. It was locked, of course, but it freaked me out. I should have called the police right then, but honestly, I was embarrassed. Embarrassed that I'd given him so much info, let him know where I worked, where I was. I just didn't want to admit how careless I'd been. The next day, I reported him on Bumble, and when he messaged me asking if I was interested in meeting again, I ignored him. I unmatched him right away. Even after that, I kept seeing his profile pop up on different apps. He didn't seem to care at all that I'd reported him. After that, I made sure to hide my location on every app. I don't tell anyone where I work anymore either. I took a job somewhere much busier, surrounded by a lot of people. Honestly, dating hasn't been the same since. It's lost its charm completely. I'm 25 now, and honestly, dating has been a complete disaster for me. Back in 2018, I was trying to recover from an awful, toxic relationship that had drained me completely. The guy I was with refused to let me leave, constantly manipulating me and threatening me whenever I tried. It took everything in me to finally cut ties, and after that, I stayed single for about 3 years. Toward the end of 2019, boredom hit me hard, and since I was stuck inside a lot, I started playing online games. At first I kept to myself, but then one particular player caught my attention. We were in the middle of a match when he struck up a conversation with me. One thing led to another, and soon we started playing together more often. Let's call him Adam. Adam and I quickly became gaming buddies, playing almost every night. We introduced ourselves properly, and he told me he was from Norway, staying in a hostel for his studies. He even mentioned the name of his university. Something about him felt off, but I chalked it up to my trust issues and ignored it. In just a few weeks, we got really close, and looking back, that should have been a major red flag. After a while, we started chatting on Instagram, but his profile was weird. No personal pictures, barely any followers, and he only followed a handful of people. Even his username wasn't real. It was the name of a character from the originals, that vampire TV show. He was always curious about my life, but rarely shared anything about himself. That should have been another warning sign, but I convinced myself he was just a private person. Maybe he had trust issues too, right? So, I didn't push him. One night, I casually asked him to send me photos of his hostel. I was living in one too, and I was genuinely curious about how things looked in Norway. A few minutes later, he sent some pictures, but something felt off. I did a reverse image search and, sure enough, they were all pulled from Pinterest and random Google pages. That should have been the final straw. I confronted him about it, and he brushed it off, saying he was just uncomfortable sharing personal details. I didn't want to come off as rude, so I let it slide. That was my biggest mistake. A few months passed, and by early 2020, we were officially dating. By then, we had built a large friend group in our game, with people from different parts of the world. It felt amazing. Growing up, I never had many close friends, just one or two. But now, I was surrounded by people who genuinely seemed to care. Everything felt perfect. Adam and I would even video call sometimes, and it really seemed like we were falling in love. I even mentioned him to my family and got my sister involved in the situation. One day, she asked about him and wanted to know more details. I told her what I knew, and she decided to look up his school online. To my surprise, there was no such school in Sweden. I was shocked, so I started doing my own research. He had sent me one blurry photo of him in a school uniform with a logo on it, and something about it didn't sit right with me. After some digging, I discovered that the school he claimed to attend was actually located in my own country. Not only that, but it was just an hour's drive from where I lived. This whole time, this guy had been lying about who he was. At the time, I was 22, and he had told me he was 20. When I confronted him, He apologized repeatedly, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. He turned the whole thing around, and I ended up feeling guilty. But I was falling for him, so I ignored the warning signs. Then he came clean, admitting that he had lived in Sweden for a while, but his family had moved back to my city because they lost all their money. It didn't add up, but I was too deep into it to question him much. I wanted to meet him in person, but he always had an excuse, always. Finally, he promised we'd meet in October, around my birthday. I stopped pushing after that. A few months passed, and that's when things started to change. His behavior became completely different. He'd go on and on about how horrible his parents were, saying they didn't want him to pursue his education anymore. Then, his story shifted. He claimed his family was broke and couldn't afford to support him. I was so invested in him by then, feeling like I needed to help fix everything, that I didn't realize how manipulated I had become. We would talk all day, every day. I was there for him no matter what. One day, in my frustration and desire to help, I ended up sending him a large sum of money so he could continue studying for his GED. The currency in my country is called LAC. He said he needed 3 LAC to cover the costs, but I ended up giving him 1 LAC. Stupid, I know, but I was completely convinced he was telling the truth. I had no idea how deep the manipulation was at the time. And it wasn't just that one time. I gave him money several times for different things, not to mention all the gifts I sent him. People around me warned me that he was using me, but I wouldn't listen. In just a year, he managed to completely isolate me from everyone in my life. I stopped talking to my friends and only spent time with him, playing games together. He started getting really strange, constantly telling me how depressed he was and how he still didn't have enough money for his GED. I told him I would try to help, maybe ask my dad for the money, but his behavior kept getting worse. He wasn't as respectful as before and started acting cold. If I ever wanted to end a call, he wouldn't let me. It felt like I was talking to a totally different person. He'd done a complete 180. Everything turned toxic. We'd argue non-stop, and the respect we once had for each other vanished. I told him I wanted to break up. I'd had enough. But every time, he would beg, cry, and promise to change. For a while, he'd seem to make an effort, but it always ended the same way. He'd fall right back into his old habits, and the cycle would continue. By March 2022, things were worse than ever. He was making terrible, even racist comments, and treating me horribly. Whenever I'd bring up the idea of meeting in person, he'd give me excuses like not having enough money or claiming his mom was too strict. The whole thing was getting out of hand. Keep in mind, I'd never met him in person. At that point, we'd been dating for over a year. Then, out of nowhere, he started bombarding me with promises of marriage, saying he was trying to get his GED and build a business for our future together. I was so mentally and physically drained at this point. My whole life was revolving around him. I'd barely sleep, spending most of my time helping him study, solving his online tests, playing games with him, and talking to him non-stop. On top of that, I was a medical student at the time, working 5 days a week and attending classes on the weekends. It was too much. I finally snapped. The next time he asked me for money, I said no. I was sick of playing the role of his caretaker. The moment I told him I couldn't help, he completely changed. Within 3 days, he stopped reaching out. He stopped. No texts, no calls. I was stunned, but I didn't reach out either. I wanted to see how he'd react. He'd still be online, but wouldn't talk to me. And when I logged into the game, he'd instantly log off. It was like I didn't exist to him anymore. So, after about 10 days of complete silence, he finally called. Like nothing had happened. He told me he was having a really hard time and couldn't be in a relationship right now, but we could still be friends. At that point, I was beyond furious. I told him to fuck off. What was I even doing for a year? I had been his emotional support, his caretaker, and now he just wanted to be friends? Hell no. I ended the call, fully expecting him to call back and apologize, but he didn't. A couple of weeks later, things took a weird turn. All my friends completely cut me off. I didn't know why, so I reached out to one of them. She told me that John had been bad-mouthing me to everyone, saying that I was the reason we broke up. He'd lied to them and blamed everything on me. None of my friends even heard my side. They just left. I was devastated. So, I called John, furious. I asked him why the hell he was spreading lies about me, and he denied everything. His responses were so calculated, it was like he'd been rehearsing them. I couldn't even argue back. It hit me. He was a full-blown narcissist. I told him I didn't want to ruin what we had, but he said he wasn't interested in dating anymore. I asked him what I had done wrong, and his answers were just bizarre. He said I'd been controlling and disrespectful. I knew he was lying, flipping everything around and putting the blame on me. And then he ended it. He said he'd still be okay with being friends, but definitely not with being a girlfriend. I hung up, heartbroken, but after a while, I found myself stalking him. I couldn't help it. What I found shocked me. He'd already replaced me with another woman who was sending him money. That's when I decided to look into the GED program he'd been so obsessed with. I contacted the place he claimed to be enrolled at, and they confirmed he was never a student there. He'd told me the course cost 1.3 lakh, but I found proof that wasn't true either. I kept digging, and the truth kept coming. Everything about him was a lie. He'd used me for money, plain and simple. But the worst part? I found out he was actually a minor, just 19 years old. He'd been 6 years younger than me the entire time, and I had no idea. He'd completely played me. I know this story is all over the place, and I'm sorry for that, but I felt like I had to share it. I don't want anyone else to make the same mistakes I did or end up stuck in a situation like this. Please, be careful out there. I don't usually share things like this, and honestly, I might regret posting it. I stumbled across this subreddit in a YouTube video and figured it was the perfect place to finally talk about something that still haunts me. I've never told a soul about it. Maybe no one will see this, but if even one person reads it and stays safer than I was, it'll be worth it. I'm not sure if I need a trigger warning, but just in case. There's a brief mention of sexual assault, though I'll keep details to a minimum. Around this time last year, I was mindlessly scrolling online like I always did. Bored out of my mind, I decided to hop on Omegle. If you don't know, Omegle was a website where you could randomly chat with strangers through text or video. It had been around for years, and I used it a lot when I was younger just to kill time. Sure, there were weirdos, but I'd also had plenty of fun and decent conversations on there. You could add tags to find people with similar interests, so I always typed in alt, short for alternative. It usually filtered out rude people and helped me find others around my age. I was 20 back then. That night, I matched with a guy who called himself Kane. We started texting, and he told me he was 24. I told him my age, and we went from there. At first, it was basic small talk, but somehow, we ended up chatting for hours. And I mean hours. We were in the same time zone, and before I knew it, I had stayed up until 6 a.m. We talked about everything. Life, philosophy, music, you name it. He was charming, funny, and honestly, I was having a great time. At some point, we started discussing where we lived, and he suddenly said, "Hey, we should meet up." I laughed it off, but he was completely serious. Turns out, we were only about 4 hours apart. He really wanted to make it happen. Normally, I'm an anxious person, but for some reason, I didn't get any bad vibes from him. We had just talked all night, and he seemed normal, no red flags. So I figured, why not? What was the worst that could happen? I know. Stupid. Looking back, I hate how naive I was. But I've always been the kind of person who gives people the benefit of the doubt. So, just like that, we started planning a camping trip. He wanted to do it in a few days since that was when he had time off work. I agreed, mostly because I had nothing better to do. I asked for his number so we could text instead of using Omegle. He gave it to me, and when I sent a message, the texts turned green on my iPhone. That meant he was using an Android. Jokingly, I asked, "Why the Android?" A few minutes later, he replied, saying he actually had 2 phones, one for work. That was the first thing that made me pause. Why would a 24-year-old need 2 phones for work? Sure, there were logical reasons, but something about it felt off. I asked what he did for a living, and he told me he worked for the state. Then he added that he had signed some agreement that prevented him from talking about it, or he could lose his job. That explanation didn't sit right with me, but I brushed it off. Maybe he worked for law enforcement or some government office. I told myself I was just overthinking. The days passed, and the trip crept closer. He wanted to take me somewhere near his town, Stuart Hill in Vermont. Don't worry, it's nowhere near where I actually live, and I couldn't care less about protecting his privacy after what happened. Before heading out, I decided to do a little research. I looked it up on Google and found a bunch of articles about how the soil there was contaminated from old mining activity. The government said it was still safe to hike, but that you should wash your skin and shoes afterward. Something about it didn't sit right with me. I texted Kane and asked why he picked a spot that might be dangerous. He reassured me it was fine, saying he and his friends camped there all the time. This kind of reassured me, I guess. I mean, he did know the area better than I did, right? My parents, though, they're always suspicious of everyone. They were really against the idea, but they finally gave in when Kane showed up at my house. He didn't even come inside. He just waited outside in his car. After a quick introduction, my mom rushed out to ask him a bunch of questions about the area we were headed to, but once she felt comfortable, we were off. We stopped at the Starbucks by my house so he could grab some coffee since he was pretty tired from the drive. We sat in his car for over an hour. He played some music and asked me to rate his playlist. Then he pulled out a little notebook and showed me that he writes down every song he likes. I thought it was weird but also kind of sweet. Like, who even does that anymore? But hey, whatever. After a while, I told him we should get going so we wouldn't get stuck on the road after dark. But he kept insisting on 5 more minutes. 30 minutes later, we finally started driving, heading for the campsite. The ride was long, about 4 hours. Most of the time, Kane just talked about himself. He told me long, drawn-out stories about his friends and some girl he used to date who he clearly still hated. It felt a little off. I mean, who talks about an ex-girlfriend like that to a girl you barely know? After a while, I tried to change the subject to something lighter. I asked him what his hobbies were. I already knew most of it from our chats online, but I was hoping to avoid more awkward silences. He went on about how eating healthy is super important, and that people who eat junk food are stupid. He also bragged about wearing only sustainable clothing, stuff made from cotton or wool. It felt kind of preachy and obnoxious. At least, that's how it came across. Then, out of nowhere, he turned to me and asked the first question he'd asked me all day. "So, what brought you to Omegle?" I told him I was just bored, and that I liked meeting new people. He paused for a second, grinning like it was some kind of joke, and said, "I go on there sometimes and tell people I'm a Russian soldier, torturing people while I chat with them." I just stared at him. For a second, I thought he was joking, like a messed up sense of humor. But he wasn't. He just laughed and said, "What?" It was such a weird thing to say, and I was starting to feel really uneasy. When we got close to the campsite, I mentioned that I was getting a little hungry. He suggested we stop at Whole Foods on the way. I wasn't thrilled. I knew he'd probably judge whatever I picked out, but I was hungry, so I agreed. At the store, he told me his card wasn't working and made me pay for both of our meals. I didn't like it, but I was just eager to get to the campsite, so I didn't say anything. Once we finished eating, we finally drove up to the mountain. Kane parked in a small lot with only a few spaces, and there were a few older guys standing around their cars, smoking weed. It didn't bother me morally, but it felt off. It was late, and I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling of being around strangers at that time of night. I was about to say something when Kane suddenly complained it was too cold to carry our stuff to the campsite. The trail was only about 10 minutes away, but he said he didn't want to walk that far. I was confused. "What do you mean? I can help you," I said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "We didn't come all the way up here for nothing," he insisted, still looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. He told me to step outside and feel how cold it is. He said it'd take a while to set up the tent, and that it'd be too much for both of us. There was no way I was getting out of that car, especially with the guys hanging around the parking lot. I rolled the window down just enough to stick my hand out, and the cold hit me like a slap in the face. He was right. It was freezing, the wind biting even more up there in the mountains. I was frustrated. This trip was turning into a disaster, and I was angry with myself for agreeing to sleep in the car. I'd been looking forward to getting away, and now it was just wasted. Kane sat quietly for a while, clearly uncomfortable with the silence, like he didn't know how to fix things. I slouched back in the seat and started scrolling through my phone, just trying to distract myself. That's when he grabbed it out of my hand and said, "Come here." Then he patted his lap like it was some kind of joke. I was already so irritated and confused by everything. I just responded, "You're funny," trying to brush him off. But before I could even grab my phone from the floor, he lunged across the seat, grabbed me, and shoved me into the back. My heart sank, and I just froze. What happened next, I can barely remember. My eyes were shut tight, and all I could think about was how badly I wanted it to end. I couldn't even process what was happening. My body just went numb. When it was over, he shoved me back into the seat and started putting his clothes back on. He had the nerve to smile at me and ask, "So, how was it?" I couldn't even speak. My eyes were filled with tears, and I just stared at him in shock. He climbed back into the front seat, propped his feet up on the steering wheel, and went to sleep, like nothing happened. I sat there, motionless, in the back seat, not sure what to do. It felt like hours passed. I kept thinking about calling my mom or 911, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I'd been through something similar before, and it nearly tore my family apart. I knew if I told them, they'd be devastated. But worse, I was scared of what might happen to Kane if they found out. I didn't want my dad or brother to end up in prison for what they might do in retaliation. So I stayed silent, sitting in the back of that car while the guys outside stared and smoked. I don't remember falling asleep, but eventually, I woke up to the sound of wind hitting the car. I was curled up in a ball, trying to hold my legs close. The men outside noticed I was awake, and one of them said, "Time to go." I was terrified. My heart was racing, and adrenaline flooded my body. I scanned the back seat for anything I could use to defend myself. I grabbed my full metal water bottle. It wasn't going to kill anyone, but at least it might knock someone out if it came to that. I clutched it tightly, trying to calm myself. Kane started the car, and I asked him where we were going. He said, "We're going to get breakfast," like it was the most obvious thing in the world. We drove down the mountain, and after a while, we ended up in a parking garage. He told me to get out, saying, "We're here." I hesitated, unwilling to let him get behind me. I kept as close to the car as possible, my mind racing with ideas of how I could escape. But I knew that if I ran, he'd catch me, and I'd be in even more danger. So, I followed him reluctantly to a little Mexican restaurant on the corner. He told me to order pancakes so he could have some too. I was so angry at that point, but I didn't say anything. I was too scared to show any emotion, knowing that it could set him off. I just did what he said, keeping my head down. I took a few bites of my food, trying to force myself to eat, but he happily finished the rest of my plate. Kane quickly paid with cash and then led me back to the car. He climbed into the back seat, telling me he was going to take a nap because he hadn't slept well the night before. I didn't want to argue with him, so I just let him sleep. How could he sleep so soundly after everything? He slept for about 3 hours while I sat in the front, watching random videos, trying to calm myself down and clear my head. It was around 9 a.m. when my mom texted, asking where I was and telling me she wanted me home. I quickly texted back saying Kane was still asleep and I'd be home soon. She wasn't happy about it and insisted I come home right away. Honestly, I was relieved. Finally, an excuse to leave, and hopefully one that would convince him. I woke Kane up, and he immediately got angry. "Don't wake me up next time," he snapped. "Just play on your phone or something." My hands were shaking, but I managed to tell him my mom wanted me home and we needed to leave. He told me to give him 30 more minutes and set a timer on my phone. I did, though every second felt like an eternity. When the timer went off, I woke him again, this time filming it because I was scared. His anger flared up immediately, and I told him that the 30 minutes were up. I begged him to leave, but he just kept saying no. I was trembling uncontrollably at this point. I tried to hide it, trying to act like I was joking, but the words just came out. "Okay, I'll just call an Uber then." I turned toward the door, hoping he'd let me go, but that's when I felt his hand grip my shoulder, hard. He yanked me back into the seat, and for a split second, I think I just froze. I could barely breathe. His grip was tight, his fingers digging into my skin. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snapped, still holding me. I was seconds away from crying, and I knew I had to think fast. I blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. "My mom's going to call the police if I'm not home soon." Earlier, I had mentioned that my dad worked in law enforcement, so it made the lie feel a little more believable. The moment I said police, his expression shifted. It was like a switch flipped, and suddenly, he looked panicked. He immediately let go of me, though he was clearly reluctant. With a huff, he agreed to drive me home. I felt a huge wave of relief, like I could finally breathe again. I swallowed hard, trying to push back the lump in my throat, as he climbed into the front seat and started the car. We were about to drive the 5 hours back to my place, and even though I felt safer, I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. The drive back was silent. I didn't say anything unless he spoke first. I just gripped my phone tightly in my hands, trying not to look at him, wondering if he even felt guilty about what he'd done. The hours seemed to drag on, but eventually, we reached the town where I lived. It was 11:30 p.m. when we got close to my house, and I saw flashing lights behind us. My heart dropped. I knew the police were behind us, and immediately, my mind went into panic mode. I've always been extra careful not to break any traffic laws, especially since my dad's a cop. The officers pulled us over, and 2 of them stepped out of their car. I quickly rolled down the window, hoping they'd recognize me, my dad's daughter. One of the cops greeted me, his expression a mix of concern and disappointment. I could tell he wasn't happy to see me in the car with someone getting pulled over. The other officer told Kane to get out of the car while I explained what we were doing out so late. I decided not to get into the awful details. I was exhausted, scared, and all I wanted was to be home, safe in my own bed. I also didn't want to wake up my dad with this nightmare. I overheard the second officer asking Kane for his information, and I could barely keep it together when I heard him mumble, "What's your name, son?" Kane hesitated, and the officer asked him to speak up. When he finally gave his name, it wasn't Kane. He said he was 22, not 23. My heart dropped, and I just sat there, frozen, as the officers told him that he had run a stop sign, but that they were going to let him off with a warning. They turned to me and told me to get home safely. I nodded, still in a daze, and as we drove off, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I snapped. "Why did you lie to me? What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted, my voice shaking with anger. He looked visibly distressed by my yelling, and in a nervous tone, he told me to calm down. "I'm sorry. I just lied about my name. It's for my safety," he said. But I couldn't believe it. How could he sit there talking about safety after everything he'd done? I screamed all the way to my house. The anger and fear felt like they were eating me alive. When we pulled into the driveway, I had enough. I threw open the car doors and started tossing my stuff out onto the lawn, desperate to get as far away from him as possible. He tried to talk to me, offering pathetic excuses for what he did, but I just screamed at him to leave. I didn't want to see him ever again. I grabbed my things and ran into the house, not wanting to look back. My parents were still asleep, unaware of the nightmare I had just lived through. Once in my room, I broke down completely. I tried to pretend everything was fine when I woke my mom up, telling her I was home, like she had asked. But as soon as I got to my room, the floodgates opened, and I sobbed into my blanket. The reality of everything that had happened started to sink in. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from him. "I'm really sorry about what happened. If it helps, I just got pulled over, so that's my karma. Let me know if you want to talk." I felt a wave of nausea hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't believe it. I took a screenshot of the message, blocked his number, and deleted everything. That was the last time I ever heard from him. I've barely spoken to anyone since that night, except my boyfriend. I still think about what happened all the time. I feel uneasy whenever someone I don't know gets too close to me, even if it's just a stranger walking by in the store. I know I shouldn't have met up with someone I didn't know, but I wanted to believe he was a normal guy. I wanted to trust him. I wish I had listened to my instincts and my parents' warnings. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened if I hadn't made up that police story. I'll never meet up with a stranger again. While trying to cope with everything, I decided to Google Nema Mountain again, hoping to understand more about the place. I found an article titled, "Cane Mountain North Trail Loop, New York." Reading it made me sick to my stomach. If you take anything away from my story, please let it be this: trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't meet up with strangers, no matter how convincing or normal they seem. I know this was a long post, and I apologize for that. It's hard to share this after all this time, after carrying this secret for so long. I'm doing it in hopes that it'll help someone else stay safe. What happened to me was horrific, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. That said, Kane, I hope I never see you again. Fuck you. I hope you're paying for what you did, whether that's in jail or somewhere much worse. Edit. I want to assure everyone that I'm getting help. I go to therapy weekly, and my doctors know about what happened. I'm not sharing this with my family or friends, as it would cause them even more pain. I'm doing better now, and will keep getting support. Thankfully, I haven't heard from Kane since that night. He's been pulled over a few more times, so I know his name is in the system. I'm sharing this to raise awareness about online safety and the importance of trusting your instincts. Please feel free to share my story, especially with younger people in your life, your little sisters, cousins, or friends. Stay safe and don't trust strangers.